The MS-6F Zaku 2 tumbled through the void, its mono-eye sensor flickering erratically as Ensign Johann Bayer fought to regain control. Warning klaxons screamed in his cockpit, radiation alerts, gravitational anomalies, systems failures cascading across every display. Through his viewport, he could see the rest of his squadron similarly disabled, their green armor plating illuminated by strange purple lightning that crackled across space itself. "Denim team to Valkyrie, we have a situation," Bayer's voice cracked over the radio. "Encountered spatial distortion during patrol. Minovsky, particle density through the roof. All systems compromised. Requesting immediate." The communication cut to static. Bayer cursed, slamming his fist against the console. 3 months into the 1-year war, and he'd thought he'd seen everything. Fought at Loom, survived the Battle of Solomon. But nothing had prepared him for whatever the hell this was. The anomaly had appeared without warning during a routine patrol near Side 5's ruins. One moment, Denim Team was sweeping for EFSF stragglers. The next, space itself was tearing open, bleeding impossible colors into the black. The 3 Zakus had been caught in the gravitic pull before they could retreat, yanked through a tunnel of light and madness that seemed to last both seconds and hours. Now Bayer's sensors were showing readings that made no sense. His position tracker claimed he was 17,000 light-years from Earth. His chronometer insisted 4 hours had passed, but his biological clock said minutes. And the stars were wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. "Denim leader to all units," crackled a voice over the radio. Sergeant Denim, their squad leader. "Report status. Denim 2. Systems at 60%, Bayer responded. "Minovsky reactor stable, but I'm getting interference I've never seen before." "Sir, where are we?" "Denim 3 here," added the 3rd pilot. "Sir, my navigation is completely fried. Star charts don't match anything in the database. This isn't just spatial displacement. I think we've been thrown clear out of our sector." "Belay the speculation," Denim snapped. "We're Principality soldiers. We adapt and overcome. All units, begin diagnostic routines and wait. I'm picking up something on radar. Multiple contacts. Bearing 270. Bayer swung his Zaku's head, the mono-eye sensor swiveling to track the new contacts. At first he thought it was debris. There was so much floating material in this region. Then his targeting system locked on and his blood ran cold. Ships. Massive ships, emerging from behind a nearby asteroid field. But not like any ships he'd seen before. They were sleek, almost elegant, with nacelles that glowed with some kind of blue light. No visible weapons arrays, no armor plating. They looked more like pleasure yachts than military vessels. "EFSF ships," Denim said, his voice hardening. "Advanced designs, probably prototypes. Command must have been developing new classes we didn't know about." "Sir, those don't look like any Federation ship I've seen," Bayer protested. "The configuration is all wrong. No mobile suit catapults, no beam cannons, nothing." "They're Federation," Denim insisted. "Who else could they be? We're at war, Ensign. Any ship that isn't ours is the enemy. Now power up your weapons and prepare for combat. We make contact, determine their capabilities, and report back to the fleet." Bayer wanted to argue, but discipline won out. He was a Zeon soldier, trained to follow orders without question. If Sergeant Denim said those were EFSF ships, then that's what they were. His hands moved across the controls, bringing his Zaku systems fully online. The 120mm machine gun, loaded with a satisfying mechanical clunk. His heat hawk warmed up, the blade beginning to glow dull red. "Denim team, attack formation," the sergeant ordered. "We'll show these Federation dogs what Zeon mobile suits can do." The 3 Zakas boosted forward, their thrusters firing bright blue plumes as they accelerated toward the unknown vessels. Aboard the USS Cochrane, a Miranda-class light cruiser on a routine survey mission near the Beta Quadrant border, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen stared at her sensor display with growing confusion. "Captain Morrison, I'm reading 3 unidentified contacts approaching at high speed. Configuration unknown. Mass approximately 60 tons each. They're humanoid." Captain David Morrison leaned forward in his command chair, his weathered face creasing with interest. 20 years in Starfleet. and he'd seen plenty of strange things. But humanoid vessels? That was new. Hail them, Lieutenant. All frequencies. Hailing frequencies open, sir. No response. Life signs? One humanoid life sign per vessel, sir. Definitely occupied. Energy readings are odd. Some kind of nuclear fusion reactor, I think. Very compact. And there's strange particle interference obscuring our sensors. Morrison nodded to his helmsman. Reduce speed to 1/4 impulse. Let's not spook them. Communications. Keep trying all. The tactical console erupted in alarm. Sir, they're firing. The Zakas had opened up with their 120mm machine guns, solid rounds accelerating to appreciable fractions of light speed. The bullets slammed into the Cochrane's shields, which rippled but held. On the bridge, the crew felt a slight shudder. Shields holding at 98%, reported the tactical officer. Sir, those were kinetic projectiles. Primitive solid ammunition. No energy weapons detected. Return fire, phasers only, Morrison ordered. Disable, don't destroy. I want to know what the hell these things are. The Cochrane's phaser arrays glowed orange, firing controlled bursts at the approaching mobile suits. The beams struck Denim Zaku square in the chest, scorching the armor but not penetrating. The mobile suit staggered in space, its mono-eye flickering. What the? Denim grunted as his cockpit shook. Some kind of directed energy weapon. More advanced than I thought. All units, close to melee range, use your heat hawks. The 3 Zakus boosted forward with surprising agility, maneuvering thrusters firing in complex patterns that spoke to skilled pilots. They spiraled and juked, making themselves difficult targets as they closed the distance to the Cochrane. Sir, they're not breaking off, Chen reported. They're accelerating directly toward us. Evasive maneuvers, but the Cochrane was designed for exploration, not combat. She was sluggish compared to the nimble Zakus. Denim's mobile suit reached the ship first, magnetic grapples in its feet locking onto the hull with a resonant clang that echoed through the entire vessel. They're boarding us, someone shouted. On the hull of the Cochrane, Sergeant Denim raised his heat hawk. The superheated blade glowed white-hot, radiating enough thermal energy to soften ship armor. He brought it down in a powerful arc, carving through the outer hull like butter. Atmosphere vented in an explosive rush, crystallizing instantly in the vacuum. Denim 2, Denim 3, follow me in, he barked over the radio. We take this ship and capture the crew for interrogation. High Command needs to know what new weapons the EFSF has developed. The 3 Zakus tore their way into the Cochrane's hull, their 18-meter frames barely fitting in the corridors designed for humanoid personnel. Denim found himself in a cargo bay, his mono-eye swiveling to take in the surroundings. Strange configuration, he muttered. No mobile suit bays, no ammunition storage. What kind of warship is this? Alarms were blaring throughout the Cochrane. Captain Morrison had ordered a site-to-site transport of all personnel from the affected sections, but the strange particle interference was disrupting transporter function. Security teams were rushing toward the breach, armed with phaser rifles. They arrived just as Denim Zaku punched through an interior bulkhead, its massive manipulator hand crushing support beams like matchsticks. The security chief, a Vulcan named Tavar, raised his hand. Hold fire. Hailing frequencies. Translator active. He touched his comm badge. This is the Federation starship Cochrane. You are in violation of comm. Denim didn't understand a word. The universal translator was trying to parse his language, but the process took time. All he saw was armed personnel in strange uniforms. One of them with pointed ears, genetic modification, he assumed, or perhaps war wounds. EFSF soldiers. Denim's voice boomed through his external speakers. Surrender immediately in the name of the Principality of Zeon, or be destroyed. He raised his 120mm machine gun and fired a warning burst over their heads. The shells tore through the corridor, shredding bulkheads and conduits. Sparks showered down as power systems failed. The security team returned fire. Phaser beams lanced across the cargo bay, striking the Zaku's armor. This time, with multiple sustained hits, the armor began to glow and deform. Denim felt his cockpit temperature rising. They've got some kind of sustained beam weapon, he reported to his team. Effective against armor with prolonged exposure. Don't give them time to concentrate fire. He surged forward, his Zaku's hand reaching out to grab at the security personnel. Tavar tried to dodge, but the massive manipulator closed around him. The Vulcan's last thought was a logical observation about the inefficiency of close-quarters combat in space vessels before the Zaku's grip crushed him. "Sieg Zeon!" Denim roared, bringing his heat hawk down on the retreating security forces. The glowing blade carved through bulkheads, support columns, anything in its path. The superheated metal ignited atmosphere, creating a fireball that rushed through the corridors. Security personnel scattered, those too slow caught in the thermal wash. Their screams echoed through the comm system. On the bridge, Captain Morrison made the hardest decision of his career. "All hands, abandon ship, evacuate to shuttlecraft and escape pods, set auto-destruct for 5 minutes. Sir, we can't just... That's an order. We're outmatched. Whatever these things are, they're designed for close combat, and our weapons can't stop them quickly enough. We evacuate and warn Starfleet. Move!" The crew scrambled for evacuation stations. Morrison was the last to leave the bridge, pausing only to activate the auto-destruct sequence. As he ran toward the nearest escape pod, he could hear the sounds of metal tearing and people screaming as the mobile suits carved their way through his ship. The escape pods launched like seeds from a dying plant, scattering in all directions. The shuttlecraft Galileo pulled away at full impulse. 20 crew members packed into a space designed for 8. 90 seconds later, the Cochrane's warp core breached. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, the matter-antimatter reaction vaporizing everything within a kilometer radius. The 3 Zakus were caught at the edge of the blast, their armor scorched and systems fried. They tumbled away, emergency thrusters firing to stabilize. "Damn it," Denham cursed. "They self-destructed rather than let us capture the ship. The EFSF is getting desperate." "Sir, I'm reading multiple small craft fleeing the area," Bayer reported. "Escape pods, I think. Should we pursue?" "Negative. Our mission is reconnaissance, not slaughter. We've learned what we needed. The EFSF has new ship designs with powerful energy weapons. We need to report this to the fleet." Denham activated his long-range transmitter. "Denham team to any Zeon forces. We've encountered EFSF ships in an unknown sector. Coordinates attached. Requesting pickup and reinforcement." The transmission rippled out through space, riding on Minovsky particle interference that made it difficult to track but also unreliable over long distances. By pure chance, it was picked up by a Zeon fleet 3 sectors away, a significant force conducting follow-up operations after the failed colony drop of Operation British. The fleet was commanded by Captain Garma Zabi, youngest son of Sovereign Degwin Soto Zabi and commander of the Earth Attack Force. His flagship, the Gaul-class atmospheric carrier Valfar, hung in space alongside 2 Musai-class light cruisers and a Papua-class supply ship. Escorting them were 30 mobile suits, a mix of Zakas, early goofs, and experimental units. "Captain Zabi," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Denham team. They report contact with EFSF forces in an uncharted sector." Garma, a young man with aristocratic features and white hair, leaned forward with interest. "EFSF? This far out? That doesn't match any intelligence reports." "Play the transmission." They listened to Denham's report, his description of the strange ships and devastating weapons. Garma's tactical officer pulled up star charts, trying to match the coordinates. "Sir, those coordinates don't match anything in our database. It's as if Denham team has been displaced thousands of light years from any known territory." "Interesting." Garma stroked his chin thoughtfully. He was young but ambitious, eager to prove himself worthy of the Zabi name. A secret EFSF staging area? Perhaps they're developing new weapons far from prying eyes. This could be the intelligence breakthrough we need. "Shall I order the fleet to investigate, Captain?" "Yes, but we'll proceed carefully. Full Minovsky particle dispersal. All mobile suit teams on standby. If the EFSF has truly developed new weapons, we need to capture samples for analysis." Garma smiled coldly. "And if we can destroy a secret Federation base, Father will finally see that I'm more than just the pretty face of Zeon propaganda." The fleet altered course, their drives burning bright as they headed toward the coordinates Denham had provided. They were heading toward Federation space, but they didn't know that. In their minds, they were hunting the Earth Federation Space Force, their hated enemy. They had no idea they were about to start a war with an entirely different civilization. Behind them, invisible in the wake of their drive plumes, a small object tumbled through space. It was a piece of debris from the destroyed Cochrane, a data recorder, still intact, still transmitting its automated distress beacon. The signal was weak, but it would be heard. And when it was, the United Federation of Planets would learn that something new and terrible had entered their space. The war of mistaken identity had begun. 3 days later, the debris field where the Cochrane had died was swarming with Starfleet vessels. The USS Enterprise D had been first on scene, her powerful sensors sweeping the area for survivors and evidence. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on his bridge, watching the view screen with a grim expression as the wreckage rotated slowly in the void. "Commander Data, what have you found?" The android officer turned from his console, his yellow eyes reflecting the bridge's ambient light. The Cochrane was destroyed by a matter-antimatter detonation, consistent with warp core breach. However, the damage pattern suggests the breach was intentional, an auto-destruct sequence. Prior to destruction, the ship sustained significant structural damage from unknown weapons. Unknown weapons? Yes, sir. Analysis of the hull fragments shows massive kinetic impacts, thermal scoring consistent with extremely high-temperature cutting tools, and crush damage from what appear to be giant mechanical grippers. Data paused. "Captain, the damage pattern is consistent with assault by large mechanized units operating in close quarters." Picard's expression darkened. "Mechanized units? You mean robots?" "Possibly, sir. However, the recovered data recorder from the Cochrane contains partial visual logs. I believe you should see them." Data transferred the footage to the main view screen. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as grainy, damaged recordings showed the last minutes of the Cochrane. They saw the 3 Zaku's approaching, saw the mobile suits tear through the hull, watched security teams being slaughtered by 18-meter machines wielding glowing axes and machine guns. "My God," Counselor Troy whispered. "What are those things?" "They appear to be piloted combat vehicles, Counselor," Data replied. "Humanoid in configuration, approximately 18 meters tall, equipped with both ranged and melee weapons. The pilot compartment appears to be located in the torso section." Commander Riker leaned forward. "Captain, we've never seen technology like this. Not from the Romulans, not from the Cardassians, not even from the Borg. Who are these people?" "That," Picard said quietly, "is what we need to find out. Data, did the recorder capture any transmissions from these mobile suits?" "Yes, sir. Audio only, heavily distorted by some form of exotic particle interference. I have been attempting to translate." Data worked his console for a moment. Translation complete. The pilots were speaking Earth languages Japanese, primarily, with some German and English mixed in. However, the dialect patterns are archaic, approximately late 20th or early 21st century. "Earth languages?" Picard's eyes widened. "But that's impossible. Earth hasn't used those language variants in over 200 years, and certainly no Earth nation possesses this technology." "I concur, Captain. It is most curious." The pilots also made repeated references to something called EFSF, which my analysis suggests stands for Earth Federation Space Force. They appeared to believe they were engaging enemy military vessels. "Earth Federation." Riker shook his head. "Captain, we're the Federation, the United Federation of Planets. Could there be some kind of confusion?" Picard stood, pacing his bridge with his hands clasped behind his back. "It seems we're dealing with a case of mistaken identity. These attackers believe we're someone else, some organization they call the Earth Federation. The question is, where do they come from, and why do they think we're their enemy?" "Sir, there's more," Data continued. "I have been analyzing the exotic particles detected during the attack. They appear to be some form of Minovsky-Ionesco particle theoretical in our physics, but apparently quite real to these attackers. The particles disrupt electromagnetic radiation, effectively blinding long-range sensors and communications. Meaning we couldn't have detected them at long range, even if we'd been looking. Correct, sir. And if they deploy these particles in significant quantities, then we'll be fighting blind. Wonderful. Picard returned to his command chair. Helm, set course for Starbase 375. We need to brief Starfleet Command immediately. This isn't just a random attack. This is potentially a first contact scenario gone catastrophically wrong. As the Enterprise warped away, carrying news of the disaster to Starfleet, the Zeon fleet continued their advance into what they believed was EFSF-controlled space. Garma Zabi stood on his bridge, reviewing tactical data with growing excitement. Sir, we're detecting multiple inhabited systems ahead, his sensor officer reported. Significant industrial capacity, large populations. This could be a major EFSF staging area. Excellent. Commence Minovsky particle dispersal. I want them blind before we strike. All mobile suit teams, prepare for combat operations. We'll hit them hard and fast. Capture what we can, destroy what we can't. Sir, his first officer ventured carefully. Some of the sensor readings are unusual. The ship configurations don't match any EFSF designs on file. And we're detecting multiple alien species in the populations. The Federation doesn't employ aliens in their military. Garma waved a hand dismissively. The EFSF is desperate. They're probably using alien auxiliaries, or perhaps genetically modified soldiers. It doesn't matter. They're still the enemy, and we're still Zeon. Sieg Zeon! Sieg Zeon! His crew chorused. The fleet advanced, their mobile suits launching in perfect formation. They were heading toward the Andorian system, home to 4 billion blue-skinned humanoids who had no idea they were about to become collateral damage in a war that had nothing to do with them. At Starfleet headquarters in San Francisco, Admiral William Ross listened to Captain Picard's report with growing horror. Around him, the Emergency Council representatives from Starfleet Command, Federation Security, and Starfleet Intelligence sat in stunned silence. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Ross said slowly. We've been attacked by humanoid combat vehicles piloted by humans speaking ancient Earth languages, who believe we're something called the Earth Federation Space Force. They destroyed the Cochrane with all hands, and intelligence suggests a larger fleet is heading toward our space. That is correct, Admiral, Picard confirmed via viewscreen. Moreover, their technology operates on principles we don't fully understand. These Minovsky particles effectively blind our sensors and disrupt communications. In any engagement, we'll be forced into visual range combat. Visual range? Admiral Nechayev scoffed. We haven't fought at visual range since the 22nd century. Nevertheless, that appears to be the reality we face. Picard's expression was grave. Admiral, I strongly recommend we attempt to establish communication with these people before more violence occurs. This appears to be a tragic case of mistaken identity. If we can make them understand. Make them understand? Ross interrupted. Captain, they destroyed a Starfleet vessel without provocation and killed 73 people. I don't care if it's a case of mistaken identity, they're hostile, and we need to respond accordingly. Admiral, with respect, Captain Picard, I'm ordering a full defensive mobilization. Every available ship is to converge on the projected path of this enemy fleet. We'll establish a picket line and attempt communication, but if they open fire, we respond with full force. Is that understood? Picard's jaw tightened. Understood, sir. Good. Enterprise is to join the defense fleet. Ross out. The transmission ended. Picard sat in his ready room, staring at the star chart showing the projected enemy approach vector. His instincts screamed that this was wrong, that violence would only beget more violence. But he was a Starfleet officer, and he had his orders. Number 1, he said into his comm badge. Set course to join the fleet. Maximum warp. As the Federation mustered its forces for war, and as Zeon advanced toward what they thought was enemy territory, neither side understood the terrible mistake they were making. Two groups of humans, separated by dimensions and definitions, were about to collide in a conflict neither wanted and neither understood. The Andorian system lay between them, peaceful and unsuspecting, about to become the first battlefield in a war of mistaken identity. The tactical hologram in the Enterprise D's briefing room displayed a nightmare. Admiral William Ross's face filled the primary screen, his expression grim as he addressed the assembled captains via subspace. Around the table sat Picard, Commander Riker, Data, and several senior Starfleet officers beamed aboard for this emergency conference. In the 72 hours since the Cochrane incident, Ross began, we've lost 6 more ships. The pattern is consistent. These mobile suits deploy some form of exotic particles that blind our sensors, then close to melee range where their physical weapons are devastatingly effective. Our shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles, provide minimal protection against 18-meter machines wielding superheated blades. Captain Sisko of Deep Space Nine leaned forward on his screen. Admiral, we need to understand what we're dealing with. Have we established any communication with these attackers? Negative. They transmit on frequencies we can detect, but they're using languages that haven't been spoken on Earth in over 200 years. Our universal translators are working on it, but the dialect patterns are so archaic it's taking time. Ross pulled up another display. What we do know is troubling. Analysis of the wreckage from Denim Team's mobile suits shows technology that's simultaneously primitive and sophisticated. Nuclear fusion reactors, something we abandoned centuries ago but integrated with miniaturization and efficiency we've never achieved. The weapons systems are crude ballistic projectiles and thermal blades, but the mobility and maneuverability exceed anything in our tactical database. Sir, Data interjected, I have completed preliminary analysis of the enemy's particle dispersal system. The Minovsky particles operate by disrupting Coulomb forces at the atomic level, creating a field of highly charged megaparticles that interfere with electromagnetic radiation. Traditional sensors, communications, and guidance systems become unreliable within the affected area. In other words, Riker translated, they've weaponized sensor jamming. Precisely, Commander. However, there is encouraging news. Our transporter technology operates on a subspace carrier wave that is not significantly affected by Minovsky particle interference. The annular confinement beam can penetrate their particle fields. Picard's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting, Mr. Data? Indeed, Captain. If we can transport through their jamming, we can potentially transport objects onto their vessels, or remove their pilots from their mobile suits during combat. The implications hung in the air. Admiral Ross spoke slowly. You're talking about transporting weapons onto enemy ships, transporting people out of their combat vehicles. That's essentially remote assassination. With respect, Admiral, Sisko said. They're killing our people without hesitation or communication. The Cochrane crew never had a chance. If we have a tactical advantage that can save lives, Federation lives, we need to use it. Ross was quiet for a moment. Agreed. All ships are authorized to utilize transporter technology as a combat asset. Beam photon charges onto enemy vessels. Extract enemy pilots. If possible, I want prisoners for interrogation. We need to understand who these people are and what they want. Admiral, Picard began carefully, if we could just establish communication. Captain Picard, communication requires 2 willing parties. So far, our new friends have shown zero interest in talking. We defend ourselves until we can make them listen. Ross out. The transmission ended. Picard sat back in his chair, troubled by the direction this conflict was taking. Around him, his senior staff exchanged glances. Captain, Riker said quietly, the Admiral's right. We've tried hailing them. We've tried to avoid combat. They've responded by destroying everything they encounter. At some point, we have to fight back. I know, number 1. I simply wish we understood why. Picard stood, smoothing his uniform. Very well, Mr. Data. Work with engineering to develop transporter-based combat protocols. Mr. Worf. Coordinate with security on rapid extraction procedures for enemy pilots. If we're going to do this, we'll do it right. Aye, sir. What Picard didn't know was that his opponent was already adapting to Federation tactics as well. Lieutenant Commander Char Aznable stood in the mobile suit hangar of the Musai-class cruiser Falmel, watching as technicians applied the final touches of crimson paint to his custom MS-6S Zaku 2 commander type. The mobile suit gleamed red even under the hangar's harsh lights, a psychological weapon as much as a combat unit. Char had learned early in the war that intimidation and recognition could be as deadly as any weapon. "Beautiful work," he said to the lead technician, his voice smooth and cultured. "Now she looks like she belongs to me." The technician saluted. "Yes, Commander Aznable. The modifications you requested are complete. Enhanced thruster output, improved reactor cooling, and reinforced frame members. This machine is 3 times faster than a standard Zaku." "Good. I'll need every advantage against these new EFSF ships." Char ran his gloved hand along the mobile suit's leg armor. "Have you heard the latest reports from the front?" "Yes, sir. They're saying the EFSF has developed some kind of new weapon. Pilots are disappearing from their cockpits. Ships are exploding from internal detonations with no visible weapon impact." "Interesting." Char's expression was hidden behind his helmet, a golden faceplate that concealed his identity from even his own crew. "Very interesting. The EFSF has been more creative than I gave them credit for. Perhaps this won't be as boring as I feared." An alarm klaxon cut through the hangar. Char's communicator crackled. "All mobile suit teams, scramble. Enemy fleet detected at Sector 7. Multiple contacts, including that space station we've been tracking." Char's lips curved into a smile beneath his helmet. "Launch sequence, now. Time to introduce the EFSF to the Red Comet." Deep Space Nine hung in the void like a mechanical flower, its docking pylons extending outward from the central core. On Ops, Commander Benjamin Sisko stood at the strategic table, watching sensor displays flicker and distort. "Report," he ordered crisply. "Sir, we're detecting massive Minovsky particle deployment," reported Science Officer Dax. "Long-range sensors are going offline. I'm reading multiple contacts approaching, but the resolution is terrible. Could be 10 ships, could be 100. Sir, we're also detecting what appear to be smaller craft deploying from the larger vessels," added Chief O'Brien from the engineering console. "Same configuration as the mobile suits from the Cochrane incident reports. Dozens of them." Sisko's jaw tightened. DS-9 was not a warship. It was a converted Cardassian mining station, heavily armed but never designed for mobile combat. If those mobile suits got close enough to board. "Hail the approaching vessels. All frequencies. No response, sir. Raise shields. Charge all phaser arrays. Launch the Defiant. If they want to fight, we'll give them one, but we'll try talking first." The USS Defiant, berthed at DS-9's lower docking pylon, disengaged with a hiss of decompressing seals. The compact warship, originally designed to fight the Borg, powered up its engines and moved into a defensive position between the station and the approaching Zeon fleet. On the Defiant's bridge, Major Kira Neris gripped her console. "Benjamin, I've got visual on the enemy. One main ship, looks like a carrier. And, oh, prophets. Those are the mobile suits. Dozens of them. Evasive pattern Delta 4. Keep us between them and the station. Target the mobile suits first, they're the boarding threat." The Zaku squadron spread out in a complex 3-dimensional formation, their pilots executing maneuvers that spoke to extensive zero-gravity combat training. But one mobile suit moved differently from the rest. It was painted crimson, and it moved with fluid grace that made it seem less like a machine and more like a dancer. Char Aznable assessed his opponents with a tactical mind honed by months of brutal combat. The space station was a fixed position dangerous to attack, but ultimately vulnerable. The smaller ship, however, that was interesting. It moved with authority, placing itself deliberately between his forces and the station. A defender. A guardian. A new mobile armor? He mused. Or perhaps this is the prototype Gundam intelligence has been warning about. Let's see what you can do. He pushed his control sticks forward, and his custom Zaku surged ahead of the formation, moving at speeds that would have torn apart a standard mobile suit. The crimson mobile suit became a red streak across the void. "Multiple targets," Kira shouted on the Defiant. "One's breaking formation, moving fast, really fast. Lock weapons and fire," Sisko ordered. The Defiant's pulse phasers blazed orange, firing rapid bursts at the approaching mobile suit. Char jinked and weaved, his enhanced reflexes and the Zaku's superior speed allowing him to dodge most of the fire. The few hits that landed scorched his armor but didn't penetrate. "Impressive," Char murmured. "Directed energy weapons with rapid recharge. But let's see how you handle this." He raised his Zaku's 120mm machine gun and fired a sustained burst. The solid rounds hammered the Defiant's shields, which flared and buckled under the kinetic assault. Inside the ship, the crew was thrown against their stations as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate. "Shields down to 70%, O'Brien reported. "Captain, those are just ballistic weapons, but they're hitting hard. Return fire, full spread. Don't give him a chance to aim." The Defiant's weapons blazed, filling space with phaser fire. Char danced through it, his movements so precise and calculated that it seemed almost prescient. He closed the distance, raising his heat hawk, the blade glowing white-hot. "Now, the EFSF will learn what close combat truly means," Char said, preparing to strike. That's when he vanished. One moment, Char Aznable was in his cockpit, surrounded by familiar controls and displays. The next moment, he was standing on a transporter pad, staring at a startled human operator and what appeared to be some kind of bipedal feline creature in a gold uniform. "What?" Char began, his hand moving toward his sidearm. The transporter operator hit an emergency button. A force field snapped into place around the pad, trapping Char in a glowing blue cage. Security officers rushed into the room, phasers raised. Char's mind raced. Teleportation. The EFSF had developed teleportation technology. The implications were staggering. If they could move people, they could move weapons, they could move troops, they could bypass any defense. In space, his Zaku tumbled without a pilot, its thrusters firing randomly. The Defiant's targeting systems locked onto the now uncontrolled mobile suit and fired. Without a pilot to evade, the Zaku was an easy target. The sustained phaser fire carved through armor, found the reactor, and the mobile suit exploded in a brilliant flash. "Got him," Kira exulted. "Wait, Benjamin. The pilot just appeared in our transporter room. How did—" "The modifications data suggested," Cisco said, understanding dawning. "We can transport through their jamming. We can take their pilots right out of their machines. Then let's use it. O'Brien, target the other mobile suits. Extract their pilots." "Aye, sir." What followed was chaos. One by one, Zeon pilots found themselves suddenly standing on transporter pads, disoriented and confused, while their mobile suits became uncontrolled derelicts. The Defiant and DS-9's weapons systematically destroyed the pilotless machines. In the Falmel's operations room, Captain Garmazabi watched in horror as his mobile suit teams were decimated. "What's happening? Why are my pilots disappearing?" "Unknown, Captain. They're just vanishing from their cockpits. Some kind of new EFSF weapon. Retreat. All units, fall back to the fleet. This isn't a battle we can win." The surviving Zakus, their pilots terrified by the incomprehensible new weapon, fled back toward their carrier. The Falmel turned and burned, its engines flaring bright as it withdrew from DS-9's weapons range. On DS-9's ops, Cisco allowed himself a moment of relief. "Cease fire. Let them go. We've made our point." "Benjamin," Kira said slowly, "we just captured 12 enemy pilots. We can finally get some answers." In the station's detention cells, the captured Zeon pilots sat in confusion and fear. Most were young men, teenagers barely out of training. They spoke languages the universal translator was still parsing, but their fear was universal. Char Aznable, separated from the others in a maximum security cell, sat calmly on his bench. Unlike his fellow pilots, he showed no fear. His golden helmet had been removed, revealing a young man with blonde hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He studied his surroundings with the analytical gaze of someone cataloging tactical data. When Cisco and Odo entered his cell, Char looked up with mild interest. "You speak English?" Cisco asked, the universal translator working in real time now. "I speak several Earth languages," Char replied smoothly. "I assume you wish to interrogate me. I will provide you with name, rank, and serial number, as required by the Antarctic Treaty. Beyond that, I have nothing to say." "The Antarctic Treaty?" Cisco exchanged glances with Odo. You mean the Geneva Conventions? I don't know what that is. The Antarctic Treaty governs the conduct of warfare between the Earth Federation Space Force and the Principality of Zeon, although I'm surprised the EFSF would honor it, given your propensity for war crimes. War crimes? Cisco's voice hardened. You people attacked our ships without warning. You killed 73 people on the Cochrane. You're trying to kill millions on DS9, and you accuse us of war crimes? Char's eyes narrowed. The Cochrane? DS9? What colony designations are those? And of course we attacked. You're the Earth Federation Space Force. You're the enemy. You've been grinding spacenoids under your heel for decades. Operation British was merely the beginning of our liberation. We're not the Earth Federation Space Force, Odo interjected. We're the United Federation of Planets. We've never heard of your Principality of Zeon. Who are you people? For the first time, Char's composure cracked. You're not, but that's impossible. You're flying military vessels in Earth orbit. You speak Earth languages. You must be the EFSF. We speak many languages, Cisco said. We're an alliance of over 150 worlds. We've been at peace for over 2 centuries. We're not your enemy. Char stared at them, his tactical mind working through the implications. If you're not the EFSF, then who have we been fighting? The interrogation was interrupted by an urgent call. Commander Cisco, report to Ops immediately. We have a situation. Cisco and Odo rushed back to Ops, leaving Char alone with his thoughts. The Zeon officer sat in his cell, processing this new information. If this truly wasn't the EFSF, if they'd been fighting the wrong enemy, the implications were staggering. On Ops, Dax had her hands full, managing incoming reports. Benjamin, we're receiving transmissions from multiple Federation colonies. The enemy fleet has split up and is conducting raids across 3 sectors. They're targeting civilian populations. Show me. The view screen displayed live feeds from Rigel V. The horror was immediate and undeniable. Zeon mobile suits were attacking the colony, their weapons tearing through civilian structures. But these weren't standard Zakas. These were different models, bulkier, with different weapons configurations. What are those? Kira breathed. MS-7B Guff mobile suits. Data's voice came over the comm from the Enterprise, which had just arrived in system. According to analysis of captured technical documents, they're an improved close combat model. The weapon configuration includes a 5-barrel 75mm machine gun in the left hand, a heat sword, and a heat rod, a superheated grappling weapon. On Rigel 5's surface, Lieutenant Ramba Ral piloted his blue goof with practiced efficiency. He was a veteran, one of Zeon's finest, but even he was confused by what he was seeing. These aren't spacenoids, he muttered, watching civilians flee. They looked human, but their clothes, their technology, even their architecture was completely foreign. Command, I'm requesting confirmation on target identity. These don't appear to be EFSF combatants. You have your orders, Lieutenant, came the cold reply from his ship. Suspected EFSF collaborators are to be eliminated. Proceed with the mission. Ramba Ral hesitated. He joined Zeon because he believed in spacenoid independence, not because he enjoyed killing civilians. But orders were orders, and questioning them in the middle of combat was how soldiers died. He raised his goof's machine gun and fired a burst over the fleeing crowd, a warning shot. Clear the area. This is a combat zone. The civilians scattered. Raoul targeted military structures instead, using his heat rod to tear down communications towers and weapons emplacements. He could accomplish his mission without massacring innocents. Not all Zeon pilots shared his scruples. Other mobile suits were less discriminating, their weapons cutting through civilian and military targets alike. The Enterprise arrived in orbit and immediately began transporter operations. But this time, the Zeon pilots were ready. They'd been warned about the vanishing weapon and had modified their tactics. MS teams, maintain minimum separation of 500 meters, ordered the Zeon tactical commander. If your wingman disappears, immediately target his last position and fire. Destroy the EFSF ship attempting the extraction. It was brutal but effective. When the Enterprise attempted to transport a goof pilot, his wingman immediately fired at the transport coordinates. The phaser-disrupted transport deposited a dead pilot on the transporter pad, killed by his own allies' friendly fire. Bloody hell, O'Brien swore on the Defiant. They're killing their own people to stop the transports. Then we adapt again, Sisko said grimly. Don't transport the pilots. Transport photon charges directly into their cockpits. Make it instant. It was a darker tactic, one that sat uneasily with everyone on the bridge. But they were fighting an enemy that would kill their own rather than be captured. Mercy seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. The battle for Rigel V turned into a brutal slugging match. Zeon mobile suits were designed for extended combat operations, with nuclear reactors that could keep them fighting for weeks. Federation ships had powerful weapons but needed to manage power carefully. When Minovsky particles disrupted fleet coordination, it became a series of individual duels, mobile suits versus starships in visual range knife fights. And then the situation escalated beyond anyone's expectations. From his cell on DS9, Shar Aznable heard the alarms and felt the station shudder. He'd been listening to comm chatter, piecing together the tactical situation. The war was spreading. Multiple colonies under attack, heavy casualties on both sides. And if what these people said was true, if they really weren't the EFSF, then Zeon was committing atrocities against innocent civilians. A guard appeared at his cell. You, Commander Sisko wants to see you. Now, Shar was escorted to Ops, where every screen showed scenes of devastation. Sisko turned to face him, and Shar was struck by the raw fury in the man's eyes. Your people just used nuclear weapons, Sisko said, his voice dangerously quiet. They launched atomic missiles at Rigel V's capital city. 2 million people, vaporized in an instant. Char felt like he'd been punched. That's impossible. Nuclear weapons are banned under the Antarctic Treaty. We don't use them against civilian targets. Well, someone didn't get that memo. Sisko gestured to the view screen. This is Rigel V. Or rather, what's left of it. Your Principality of Zeon just committed genocide. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Who the hell are you people, and why are you doing this? Char stared at the mushroom cloud still rising from Rigel V's surface. His mind raced through the implications. If Zeon had used nukes, it meant someone high in the command structure had authorized it. It meant the rules of war had broken down. It meant, my name is Casval Rem Daikun, Char said quietly, using his real name for the first time in years. And I think we've made a terrible mistake. Before Sisko could respond, every console in Ops lit up with warnings. Dax's voice was sharp with alarm. Benjamin, we have incoming, big incoming, multiple Federation starships, and they're charging weapons. What? Who's firing? It's Admiral Nechaev's battle group. They're preparing a full photon torpedo spread, targeting the Zeon fleet positions. Shar understood immediately. They're retaliating for the nuclear attack. They're going to destroy my entire fleet. And they're right to do it, Sisko said harshly. You people started this war. But we thought. Shar stopped, realizing the futility. Mistaken identity or not, Zeon had fired first, had killed civilians, had used nuclear weapons. From the Federation's perspective, they were the aggressors, pure and simple. Please, Shar said, and for once his tactical mask slipped, revealing genuine emotion. Let me speak to my people. Let me tell them to stand down. This war doesn't have to continue. Sisko studied the young man before him. Behind the arrogance and the tactical genius, he saw something familiar, a soldier caught in a war he didn't fully understand, trying desperately to find a way to stop the killing. Dax, open a channel. Let's see if we can end this before more people die. But even as the channel opened, even as Char prepared to speak, events were spiraling beyond anyone's control. The Zeon fleet, believing they were facing EFSF retaliation, was preparing their own nuclear strike. The Federation fleet was locked and loaded, ready to unleash devastation. And somewhere in the chaos, a single Zeon commander was making a decision that would push this conflict past the point of no return. Captain Garmazabi, believing he was fighting the EFSF, believing the nuclear strikes were justified retaliation for Earth Federation atrocities, was preparing to deploy the ultimate weapon in Zeon's arsenal. He was going to drop a colony on Earth. The colony of New Providence had been a peaceful world for over a century. Settled by humans and Bolians in the early 24th century, it had grown into a thriving agricultural center with a population of 8 million. Its cities were small, comfortable, designed for a society that had long forgotten what war looked like. That peace ended when the Goofs arrived. Lieutenant Ramba Ral's blue MS-7B Goof landed in the central plaza of New Providence's capital city with a thunderous impact that shattered pavement and sent civilians fleeing in terror. Around him, 5 more Goofs took up positions, their mono eyes sweeping across the architecture with mechanical precision. Through his cockpit viewport, Ral watched people run. Not soldiers, not resistance fighters, just people, men, women, children fleeing in panic from something they'd never seen before. An elderly Bolian man stumbled and fell, his blue skin stark against the gray pavement. A young human woman stopped to help him, even as Ral's Goof loomed over them like a metal colossus. Zeon occupying force, beginning pacification operations, Ral reported over the comm. His voice was professional, but there was an undercurrent of unease. 3 weeks into this campaign, and he still didn't understand who they were fighting. These people didn't act like EFSF soldiers. They acted like civilians, caught in a war they didn't understand. "Lieutenant Ral, you have your orders," came the cold reply from orbit. "Secure the colony, eliminate any resistance, establish Zeon authority." "Understood." Ral switched to his squad frequency. "All units, crowd control protocols. Warning shots only unless fired upon. These are non-combatants." Not all Zeon pilots shared his restraint. Ensign Wald, piloting a Goof painted in desert camouflage, raised his 5-barrel 75mm machine gun toward a cluster of fleeing civilians. "They're running. That makes them guilty." "Belay that," Ral snapped. "Wald, target the government building only. Show them we mean business, but no civilian casualties unless absolutely necessary." Wald hesitated, then redirected his aim. The machine gun roared, 5 barrels firing in a rotating sequence that sounded like an industrial shredder. The shells tore through the government building's facade, shattering windows and collapsing the ornate entrance. Debris rained down, and somewhere in the chaos, people were screaming. Ral's tactical display showed the building's interior empty. The government officials had fled hours ago, warned by some kind of faster-than-light communication that Zeon still didn't understand. Good. He hadn't wanted to kill bureaucrats, even if they were enemy collaborators. "All units, advance to secondary objectives. Secure the spaceport, the power station, and the communications hub. Standard occupation doctrine." As his Goof moved through the streets, each footstep leaving meter-deep craters in the pavement, Ral found himself studying the architecture. This wasn't Earth. The buildings were too different, the aesthetic too alien. The EFSF built with function over form, steel and concrete and brutal efficiency. But New Providence's buildings incorporated artistic flourishes, natural materials, designs that spoke to a culture that valued beauty as much as utility. "Lieutenant," his second, Ensign Akis, called over the comm. "I'm seeing something strange. These people, they're not just humans. Some of them have blue skin. Others have spots on their necks. Sir, are we sure these are EFSF colonists?" Ral had noticed the same thing. In his universe, genetic modification was banned under the Antarctic Treaty. But here, he'd seen people with features that couldn't be explained by any modification he knew. Different species, perhaps? Aliens? "Stay focused on the mission," he ordered, pushing down his own doubts. "Command says they're the enemy. That's all we need to know." But he didn't believe it. And neither, he suspected, did most of his men. The resistance came not from Starfleet. The local security detachment had evacuated civilians and fallen back to prepared positions, but from the civilians themselves. A Bolian engineer named Koreth had been visiting his daughter when the Goofs landed. He'd watched from his apartment window as the mobile suits took control of his city, their weapons casually demolishing buildings that had stood for a century. Koreth wasn't a soldier. He was 63 years old, overweight, with bad knees and worse eyesight. But he'd served in Starfleet 40 years ago, before retiring to raise a family, and he still remembered how to fire a phaser rifle. He found one in a security station the guards had abandoned. The power cell showed half charge. Enough. From a rooftop 300 meters away, Korith sighted down on the blue goof, the one that seemed to be in command. His hands shook. He'd never killed anyone. Never even fired at a living target outside of training simulations. But these invaders were in his city, threatening his daughter, occupying his home. He squeezed the trigger. The phaser beam lanced across the distance, a orange streak in the afternoon sun. It struck Ral's goof in the shoulder joint, where armor was thinner to allow articulation. The beam burned through the outer layer, scorched the myomers beneath, and set off a minor warning alarm in Ral's cockpit. "Contact, rooftop sniper, engaging." Wald's voice was eager, almost excited. Before Ral could order restraint, Wald's machine gun was already firing. The shells walked up the side of the building where Korith had fired from, tearing through ferrocrete and support beams. The entire structure groaned, swayed, and began to collapse. Korith ran for the stairwell, but he was old and slow. The building came down around him, tons of rubble crushing everything beneath. His last thought was of his daughter's face. "Target neutralized," Wald reported with satisfaction. Ral stared at the smoking ruins. That was a civilian building, Ensign. There could have been hundreds of people inside. Then they shouldn't have harbored a sniper. Besides, they're Spacenoid traders. They deserve... Belay that talk. Ral's voice was sharp. "We're soldiers of Zeon, not murderers. Remember why we're fighting for Spacenoid independence, not for the pleasure of killing." "Yes, sir." Wald's tone suggested he didn't agree, but discipline held. The occupation continued. More Starfleet security personnel tried to mount resistance. They lasted minutes against the goof's overwhelming firepower. The heat rod's superheated grappling cables that could melt through armor and entangle targets proved devastatingly effective. One security team tried to set up a heavy phaser emplacement on a highway overpass. A heat rod wrapped around their position, the thermal energy igniting the air itself. The defenders died screaming. Another team tried to use the city's underground maintenance tunnels to flank a goof patrol. They managed to plant explosive charges under a mobile suit's foot. The explosion damaged the goof's leg actuator, forcing it to a knee. The pilot, furious and humiliated, used his heat sword to collapse the tunnel system, killing everyone inside and cutting off power to 3 city blocks. By nightfall, organized resistance had ended. The Starfleet Security Detachment 20 officers when the day began had been reduced to 3 survivors who'd retreated to the outskirts. The civilian casualties were harder to count, but Ral's computer estimated at least 3,000 dead. "This isn't war," he muttered to himself, alone in his cockpit as New Providence's lights flickered and died under Zeon control. "This is murder." From orbit, Captain Garma Zabi watched the occupation of 3 Federation colonies with satisfaction. New Providence, Deneva, and Benthos were now under Zeon control. They would serve as forward bases for future operations and sources of raw materials for the war effort. Garma stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Valkyrie, studying holographic displays showing the occupied territories. He was young, barely 20, with white hair and aristocratic features that made him look more like a propaganda poster than a military commander, which, in many ways, was exactly what he was. Youngest son of Degwin Soto Zabi, sovereign of Zeon, Garma had been given this command partly for his tactical ability and partly to give the Zabi family a heroic face for the public. "Excellent work, Lieutenant Ral," Garma said over the comm. "Continue pacification operations, establish garrison forces, and begin resource extraction. The Principality needs everything these colonies can provide." "Sir," Ral's voice came back carefully, "these people aren't Spacenoids. They don't even understand why we're here. Perhaps if we attempted communication, they collaborate with the EFSF. That makes them the enemy." Garma's voice carried the certainty of youth and privilege. "Your orders stand, Lieutenant." Garma out. Beside Garma, his tactical officer, a veteran named Captain Gotham, studied the colony displays with a more experienced eye. "Sir, with respect, Lieutenant Ral has a point. The colonies we've occupied don't match any EFSF profile in our database. The technology is different. The population demographics are wrong, and the languages are Earth languages," Garma interrupted, "which means these are Earth people. The EFSF has clearly expanded further than we knew. This is intelligence we need, Captain. We're discovering the true extent of the Federation's reach. Gadam wanted to argue further, but knew better. The Zabi family didn't tolerate contradiction, even when they were wrong. Especially when they were wrong. As you say, sir. Shall I begin organizing supply lines from the occupied colonies? Yes, and increase mobile suit patrols. I want to know immediately if the EFSF attempts to retake these positions. On Starbase 375, Admiral Ross convened an emergency meeting of Starfleet's senior commanders. The holographic display showed the 3 occupied colonies highlighted in red, a cancer spreading through Federation space. Around the conference table sat the faces of Starfleet's finest, Picard, Sisko, Janeway, and a dozen admirals whose commands stretched across the Federation. Gentlemen, ladies, we have a crisis, Ross began, his voice heavy with the weight of command. 3 of our colonies are under enemy occupation. Intelligence suggests they're establishing permanent bases. If we don't act soon, we'll have a hostile power embedded in Federation territory. But more than that, we'll send a message to every colony in the Federation that Starfleet can't protect them. Captain Picard studied the tactical display with a frown. The 3 colonies formed a rough triangle, each about 6 light-years from the others, strategically placed for mutual support. Whoever was commanding the Zeon forces had a good tactical mind. Admiral, have we made any progress in establishing communication with these attackers? Every engagement suggests they believe we're their enemy, but we still don't know why. Captain Sisko managed to capture one of their pilots, a man calling himself Char Aznable. The interrogation revealed something disturbing. Ross pulled up a recording of Char's interrogation, the golden-helmeted man sitting calmly despite his imprisonment. They call themselves the Principality of Zeon. They're from Earth, our Earth, but from an alternate timeline or parallel universe. They're fighting a war against something called the Earth Federation Space Force. They think we're their enemy. A case of mistaken identity, Picard said, a note of hope in his voice. Then surely if we can make them understand. It's too late for that, Captain. Admiral Nechaev's voice was cold as vacuum. They've killed thousands of our people. They've occupied 3 colonies. They're using nuclear weapons. I don't care if they think we're someone else, they're hostile, and they need to be removed from our space by any means necessary. I agree, added Admiral Nakamura, his weathered face set in grim lines. We need to retake those colonies, show these Zeons that the Federation isn't defenseless. More importantly, we need to show our own people that Starfleet can protect them. Any ground assault will be a bloodbath, warned Colonel Kira Nerys, representing Bajoran military observers. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd fought a guerrilla war for years. I've read the tactical reports from New Providence. I've studied the sensor logs from every mobile suit engagement. These machines are designed specifically for ground combat. They're faster than our ground vehicles, more heavily armed than anything short of a shuttlecraft, and more maneuverable than anything we can field. Sending security teams against them is suicide. Then what do you suggest, Colonel? Ross asked. Kira met his eyes steadily. Orbital bombardment. Take out their mobile suits from space before they can respond. It's brutal, but it's the only option that doesn't result in total casualties for our ground forces. The room fell silent. Orbital bombardment of occupied colonies meant civilian casualties, potentially massive civilian casualties. No, Picard said firmly, his voice cutting through the silence like a phaser beam. We can't fire on our own colonies. The civilian death toll would be catastrophic. Those colonies are already suffering under occupation, Nechaev countered. Intelligence reports indicate the occupiers are executing anyone they consider resistance. They're conscripting civilians for labor. They're stripping resources with no concern for the local ecosystem. Every day we delay, more of our people die. And orbital bombardment will kill them faster, Picard shot back. We'll be doing the enemy's work for them. We'll be liberating them, Nechaev insisted. Yes, there will be casualties. War always has casualties. But the alternative is allowing a hostile power to fortify positions in the heart of Federation space. How long before they occupy 10 colonies? 20? At what point does the cost of inaction exceed the cost of action? Ross held up a hand. forestalling further argument. Enough. I understand both positions. Captain Picard, I respect your moral stance, but Admiral Nechayev is correct about the strategic situation. We can't allow Zeon to establish permanent bases on our colonies. He paused, the weight of command evident in every line of his face. We'll attempt a surgical strike. Target only confirmed military positions. Minimize civilian casualties as much as possible, but those colonies will be liberated. Admiral, Picard began. That's an order, Captain. We're not the aggressors here. We didn't start this war. But by God, we're going to win it, and we're going to protect our people, even if that means making hard choices. Picard sat back, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. Around the table, he saw the same conflict playing out on other faces. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. Starfleet was supposed to explore, to seek out new life, to build bridges between civilizations, not to bomb their own colonies from orbit. But war had its own logic, and that logic was grinding the Federation's ideals to dust. On Beta Z, a world of telepaths and philosophers, the news of the three occupations had created panic that rippled through the planetary psychic consciousness like a scream. Betazoids were empaths, feeling the emotions of others as clearly as their own thoughts. The terror of 8 million colonists under occupation was a psychic wound that every Betazoid on the planet could feel. The planetary government had requested Starfleet protection, and a battalion of Starfleet Marines had been deployed to the surface, 1,000 highly trained personnel, equipped with the best weapons and armor Starfleet could provide. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, commanding the Marine detachment, stood on a hillside overlooking Beta Z's capital and wished he had better news to report to the locals. His tactical display showed defensive positions, weapons emplacements, fallback zones. On paper, they had a solid defense. In reality, they were preparing to fight gods with pea shooters. "Sir, our defensive positions are established," reported his tactical officer, Captain Melissa Rand. She was a veteran of the Dominion War, decorated for valor, experienced in combat operations. Right now, she looked scared. "But if those mobile suits hit us like they hit New Providence, we're not going to last long. Have you seen the after-action reports? An entire Starfleet security detachment wiped out in under an hour." "I know," Webb said grimly. He'd read the reports. He'd watched the sensor logs of goofs carving through defensive positions like they weren't even there. Heat rods that melted armor. Machine guns that could shred a hardened bunker. Heat swords that could cut through starship-grade duranium. But we're what they've got. We hold the line until the fleet can provide support. With all due respect, sir, how do we hold the line against 18-meter robots that can shrug off phaser fire? Webb didn't have an answer. So he did what commanders had done since time immemorial. When facing impossible odds, he lied. "We adapt. We improvise. We use tactics they don't expect. These Zeon pilots think they're invincible because they've been fighting an outmatched enemy. Let's show them what Starfleet Marines can do when we're properly prepared and defending our home." It was a good speech. Rand even managed a smile. Webb wished he believed his own words. The answer to his unspoken question came 3 days later when Zeon deployed a new mobile suit variant that made the goof look like a training unit. The MS-09 Dom was a terror weapon made manifest. Unlike the Zaku's jump jet mobility or the goof's ground-based maneuverability, the Dom could hover, its massive leg-mounted thermojet engines generating enough thrust to float the 18-meter machine across terrain at high speed. Armed with a 360mm giant bazooka that could level a city block with a single shot, and featuring improved armor that made it nearly impervious to standard phaser fire, it was designed for one purpose: to dominate ground combat so completely that resistance became futile. 12 Doms descended on Beta Z like gods of war, their brown and purple armor gleaming in the planet's twin suns. They moved across the landscape at speeds that seemed to violate physics. Massive machines that should have been lumbering behemoths, instead gliding across the terrain like skaters on ice, their thrusters kicking up hurricanes of dust and debris that obscured them from visual targeting. Lieutenant Gaia, leader of the Black Tri-Stars Dom team, surveyed the battlefield through his cockpit displays with professional satisfaction. The EFSF forces were dug in. He could see their defensive positions, their weapons emplacements, their fallback routes. Good tactics for fighting an infantry assault or even light armor. Useless against DOMs. Black Tri-Stars, advance in formation, he ordered. Show these EFSF dogs what real mobile suit combat looks like. The 3 DOMs of the Tri-Stars, Gaias, Ortegas, and Mashes, moved forward in perfect coordination, their pilots having trained together for so long they could anticipate each other's movements. Behind them, 9 more DOMs spread out in a wide formation, covering all possible retreat routes. Contact. Multiple targets. Range 800 meters. Webb's tactical officer shouted. All units, weapons free. The Marine line erupted in phaser fire. 100 rifles blazing orange, each one capable of vaporizing an unshielded humanoid target. The concentrated fire struck Gaia's DOM across the chest, heating the armor to white-hot temperatures. Inside his cockpit, Gaia felt the temperature rise slightly as his cooling systems struggled to dissipate the thermal load. They've got directed energy weapons, more powerful than I expected. All units, don't give them time for sustained fire. Attack. The DOMs surged forward, their thrusters screaming. Gaia raised his 360mm giant bazooka, a weapon that looked more like a small starship engine than a handheld gun, and fired. The shell was larger than a human torso, propelled by a shaped charge that could punch through a battleship's armor. The explosion hit the Marine position like the fist of an angry god. The blast crater was 20 meters wide and 5 meters deep. 2 squads, 40 Marines, simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the thermal bloom. The shockwave threw survivors 50 meters through the air, most of them dead before they hit the ground. Fall back! Fall back! Webb screamed into his comm, but there was nowhere to fall back to. The DOMs were everywhere, their mobility allowing them to flank and encircle before the Marines could reposition. Their thrusters kicked up massive dust clouds that made targeting impossible. A DOM landed directly in front of Webb's position, its thrusters reversing at the last moment to kill its forward momentum. The machine settled to the ground with surprising delicacy for something that massed over 80 tons. Its mono-eye swiveled, focusing on Webb's position with mechanical precision. Webb raised his phaser rifle, knowing it was futile, and fired. The beam struck the DOM's chest armor, heating it but not penetrating. The DOM didn't even flinch. It raised its foot, a massive, multi-ton boot designed to crush anything beneath it, and brought it down. Webb dove aside. The impact crater where he'd been standing a moment ago, smoking and shattered. He rolled to his feet, trying to run, but a heat saber 10 meters of superheated metal that glowed white-hot even in daylight carved through his position. The thermal bloom incinerated him before his nerves could even register pain. Captain Rand watched her commander die from 200 meters away. She was coordinating the retreat, what was left of it, when Ortega's DOM appeared behind her position. The giant bazooka spoke once, and her entire squad ceased to exist. The Battle of Beta Z lasted 47 minutes. Of the 1,000 Starfleet Marines who defended the planet, 38 survived. The DOMs suffered no casualties, not even significant damage. On the Enterprise bridge, Picard received the casualty reports with a sense of growing horror. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly his knuckles went white. Nearly 1,000 people, in less than an hour. The mobile suits are evolving, Data reported from his station, his android features showing no emotion even as he delivered devastating news. Each new variant incorporates lessons learned from previous engagements. The DOM's improved armor appears to be designed specifically to counter sustained phaser fire. The thermal dissipation systems are significantly more advanced than those in the Goof or Zaku models, and the hover capability provides mobility that our ground forces simply cannot match. They're adapting faster than we are, Riker said quietly, learning from each battle, getting stronger while we're still trying to figure out how to fight them. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Ross, Worf announced. It's marked urgent. Ross's face appeared on screen, and Picard immediately saw the weight of command crushing the man's shoulders. His eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, Picard could see other officers working frantically at consoles. Captain Picard, Operation Reclamation is a go. The Enterprise is assigned to the New Providence Liberation Fleet. We hit them in 6 hours. Assemble at coordinates I'm transmitting now. Admiral, the civilian casualties. are already being counted, Captain. We've lost 1,000 Marines on Beta Z. We've got 3 colonies under occupation. We're facing an enemy that can land on any planet and turn it into a fortress in days. Ross's voice was harsh with exhaustion and stress. If we don't act now, we'll lose more than 3 colonies. We'll lose the Federation's ability to protect its own people. We'll lose the trust of every citizen who looks to Starfleet for protection. Operation Reclamation launches in 6 hours. Ross out. The transmission ended. Picard sat in his command chair, feeling the weight of what was coming. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders, their faces showing the same conflict he felt. Mr. Data, prepare tactical analysis of New Providence's occupied zones. I want to know exactly where their forces are concentrated. Aye, sir. Mr. Worf, coordinate with the fleet. I want targeting solutions that minimize civilian casualties. Understood, Captain. And someone, Picard said quietly, please tell me how we became the kind of people who bomb our own colonies from orbit. No one had an answer. The Liberation Fleet assembled 20 starships, including the Enterprise, the USS Defiant, and the USS Voyager. Their target was New Providence, where intelligence suggested Zeon had concentrated their garrison forces. The fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the system, giving their sensors time to penetrate the Minovsky interference and identify targets. All ships, this is Admiral Nekayev, came the cold voice over all channels. Attack pattern Omega. Target all confirmed mobile suit signatures. Remember, these targets are in population centers, surgical strikes only. But make no mistake, those mobile suits must be destroyed. Fire on my mark. The fleet dropped out of warp in orbit over New Providence. Their sensors, still struggling with Minovsky interference, showed dozens of mobile suit signatures across the planet's surface. Each one was in or near a civilian population center. Each target meant potential civilian casualties measured in thousands. On the surface, in the ruins of New Providence's government district, Ramba Ral sat in his Goof's cockpit and reviewed occupation reports. 3 weeks of garrison duty. 3 weeks of watching his men brutalize civilians who didn't understand why they were being punished. 3 weeks of enforcing orders he didn't believe in. His tactical display suddenly lit up with warnings. Multiple contacts in orbit. Energy signatures consistent with EFSF warships. All units, emergency alert. Finally, Ensign Wald's voice came over the comm, eager and excited. The EFSF is counterattacking. Now we'll show them what Zeon can do. Ral didn't share his enthusiasm. He'd been studying the enemy, this Federation that claimed not to be the EFSF. Their ships carried weapons that could devastate a planetary surface from orbit. If they were willing to fire on their own colonies to destroy Zeon forces, the casualties would be catastrophic. All units, this is Lieutenant Ral. Prepare for orbital bombardment. Scatter formation. Don't give them concentrated targets. Scatter? We should be rallying to defend our position. Our position is in the middle of a civilian population center, you idiot. If we stay concentrated, they'll drop enough ordnance to level the entire city just to make sure they get us. Too late. Admiral Nechayev gave the order. Fire. The bombardment was surgical but devastating. Quantum torpedoes and photon torpedoes rained down from orbit, targeting known Zeon positions with precision that would have been impossible without Data's calculations. The first salvo destroyed 6 goofs that had been clustered together near the spaceport. The mobile suits simply vaporized, along with the spaceport terminal and 300 civilians who'd been sheltering there. The second salvo targeted the power station where 4 Zakus had been conducting maintenance. The torpedoes punched through the facility's reactor shielding and detonated inside. The resulting explosion leveled 6 city blocks and killed an estimated 12,000 people. Raoul felt his goof shake as an explosion erupted 100 meters away, close enough to send shrapnel pinging off his armor. Through his viewport, he saw the building where he'd established his command post collapse in a shower of debris and flame. All units, emergency scatter. We're under orbital bombardment. Raoul's goof boosted skyward on pillars of thrust, joining dozens of other mobile suits fleeing the surface. Behind them, New Providence burned. Entire districts were aflame. The death toll was climbing into the tens of thousands. They're firing on their own colonies, Wald screamed over the comm. his voice shrill with outrage and fear. "The EFSF has gone insane. They're killing their own people." Raoul's tactical mind processed the situation with cold clarity, even as his heart screamed at the horror of it. The Federation, whoever they were, had decided the colonies were acceptable losses if it meant destroying Zeon forces. It was brutal, ruthless, and tactically sound. It was also exactly what Zeon would have done in their position. Exactly what Zeon had done at the beginning of the One-Year War, when they dropped a colony on Earth and killed billions. "All mobile suits, evacuate to orbit. We can't fight an orbital bombardment." Raoul's goof boosted skyward, joining dozens of other mobile suits fleeing the surface. Behind them, New Providence burned. The space battle that followed was chaotic and brutal. Zeon mobile suits swarmed the Federation fleet like angry insects, their nuclear-powered reactors giving them operational endurance that starships couldn't match. In the confused, close-range knife fight that developed, both sides took heavy losses. The Defiance pulse phasers carved through Zaku after Zaku, each burst of orange light leaving a mobile suit tumbling through space, its pilot dead or dying. The Enterprise's torpedo spreads caught mobile suits in devastating explosions that scattered debris across cubic kilometers. Voyager's transphasic torpedoes phased through armor and detonated inside cockpits with surgical precision. But the Zeons fought with desperate courage, born of seeing their comrades die and their positions bombed. Damaged mobile suits rammed starships, their nuclear reactors set to overload on impact. Pilots whose weapons were exhausted used their mobile suits as kinetic missiles, sacrificing themselves to take Federation ships with them. One Zaku, its right arm blown off and its reactor damaged, managed to crash directly into the USS Copernicus's bridge, killing everyone there and leaving the ship drifting. Raoul watched 5 of his pilots die in the span of minutes. Good men, soldiers he'd trained with, friends he'd shared drinks with, all gone. For what? For a war that might be based on a mistake? "This is madness," he said to no one, his voice lost in the chaos of combat. "We're being slaughtered. Then die for Zeon." Another pilot screamed over an open channel before his goof exploded under sustained phaser fire from 3 Federation ships. No. Raoul's voice was quiet but firm. He'd had enough. Enough dying. Enough killing. Enough of this pointless war against people who might not even be the enemy. Emergency retreat. All surviving units, fall back to the fleet. We can't win this battle. As the surviving mobile suits retreated, Picard surveyed the results of Operation Reclamation from his bridge. The view screen showed New Providence below, smoke rising from dozens of impact sites. Entire sections of cities were burning. His computer estimated civilian casualties at 50,000, with hundreds of thousands more displaced. "We've won, Captain," Riker said quietly, but there was no victory in his voice. "They're retreating. Yes, number 1. But at what cost?" Picard gestured to the view screen, where New Providence smoldered beneath a pall of smoke. "We bombarded our own colony. We killed our own people to drive out an enemy who thinks we're someone else. We've destroyed what we were trying to save." "What have we become?" Before Riker could answer, Data spoke up from his console, his android precision cutting through the somber mood. "Captain, I'm detecting a new contact entering the system. Configuration unknown. Energy signature. Extremely high. Significantly higher than any mobile suit we've encountered. Sir, I believe it may be a new variant of mobile suit." On screen, the view screen showed a mobile suit unlike any they'd seen before. It was sleeker than a Zaku, more refined than a goof, with none of the bulky appearance that characterized Zeon designs. Its armor was painted in Zeon's military green, but the proportions spoke to advanced engineering and aerodynamic efficiency. And mounted on its right arm was a weapon that made Picard's blood run cold. A beam rifle, its barrel glowing with barely contained energy that registered on sensors from thousands of kilometers away. "That's a directed energy weapon," Worf growled from tactical, his Klingon instincts recognizing a threat when he saw one. "Mobile suits with beam weapons. They're matching our technology." "No," Data corrected. "Sensor analysis suggests the weapon may exceed our phaser output in terms of raw energy per shot. It appears to be designed specifically for anti-ship combat." The mobile suit was a YMS-14 Gelgoog, Zeon's newest and most advanced production model, rushed into service ahead of schedule because of the unexpected difficulty of this new war. And piloting it was a man in a golden helmet, his crimson custom unit standing out among the standard green Gelgoogs surrounding him. Shar Aznavoul had escaped from DS9 during a prisoner transfer gone wrong, using a combination of insider knowledge and carefully cultivated contacts to break free. Now he was back, flying the most advanced mobile suit in Zeon's arsenal, and he'd brought friends a full squadron of 12 Gelgoogs, their beam rifles charged and ready. Federation fleet. Char's voice came over all frequencies, perfectly translated by the universal translator that had finally parsed his dialect completely. I am Commander Char Aznavoul of the Principality of Zeon. I was your prisoner. I listened to your words about peace and mistaken identity, and then I watched you bombard your own colonies. I watched you kill your own people. You committed an atrocity against the very citizens you claim to protect. In the name of Spaceanoid justice, in the name of all those who've died in this war, we will deliver retribution. He's serious, Troy said, her empathic abilities picking up the waves of determination and rage radiating from the distant pilot even across the vast distance of space. He believes the Federation massacred civilians deliberately. He believes we're monsters. Captain, the mobile suits are moving into attack formation, Worf reported, his hands already working his console. They're targeting the Gelgoogs opened fire. Their beam rifles, operating on the same megaparticle principles as Zeon's ship-mounted beam cannons, but miniaturized and optimized for mobile suit use, carved through starship shields like they were tissue paper. The beams were coherent, focused, and devastatingly powerful. The USS Constellation took 3 direct hits to her engineering section. The shields barely slowed the beams, and the ship's warp core detonated. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface, a brief new star that marked the deaths of 700 people. Evasive maneuvers, Picard ordered, gripping his armrests. Return fire, all weapons. The Enterprise's phasers lanced out, striking Char's custom Gelgoog directly. The mobile suit's armor glowed white-hot under the sustained fire. But Char's enhanced reflexes, the product of years of combat, and possibly some genetic advantage, and the Gelgoog's improved defensive systems kept him in the fight. He danced through the phaser fire with movements that seemed almost prescient, his beam rifle blazing, each shot carving armor off the Enterprise's hull. Shields down to 40%, Worf reported, his voice tight with stress. Captain, those beam weapons are extremely effective against our shields. We can't trade fire with them at close range without taking critical damage. Target their weapons, Picard ordered. If we can disable those beam rifles. Another Gelgoog swooped past the Enterprise's dorsal surface, its beam rifle firing at point-blank range. The shot carved a 30-meter gash through the saucer section, venting atmosphere and killing everyone in 3 science labs. Shields failing. Multiple hull breaches. Casualties on decks 8 through 12. Picard made the decision he'd been dreading. All ships, fall back, maximum warp. We can't hold this position. Sir, Worf began. That's an order, Commander. We've accomplished our objective. New Providence is liberated. Further engagement will only result in more casualties we can't afford. All ships, retreat. As the Federation fleet fled, Char watched them go with grim satisfaction tempered by exhaustion. That's right. Run. Learn what it means to fight Zeon. Learn what we've felt for months, the desperation of fighting an enemy you can't defeat. But inside his helmet, Casval Rem Dekun was troubled. The more he fought this Federation, the less he believed they were the EFSF. Their ships were too different. Their tactics were too alien. Their shock at being attacked, their confusion about Zeon's motives, it all felt genuine. And most damning of all, they'd killed their own people to drive Zeon out. That wasn't EFSF doctrine. The Earth Federation was ruthless, but they valued their colonial populations as sources of resources and labor. They wouldn't casually sacrifice 50,000 colonists just to destroy some mobile suits. Unless they weren't the EFSF at all. Unless Zeon really had been fighting the wrong enemy this whole time. What have we done? Char whispered to himself, his voice lost in the emptiness of his cockpit. But the war machine he'd helped create was rolling forward, gathering momentum, and he didn't know how to stop it. Didn't know if it could be stopped. All he knew was that more people were going to die on both sides before anyone figured out the truth. The spatial anomaly appeared without warning near Starbase 47, a Federation listening post on the edge of explored space. It was similar to the rift that had brought the Zeon fleet into this universe weeks earlier, a tear in space-time that bled impossible colors and gravitational distortions that made sensors scream with contradictory data. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was on duty when the anomaly stabilized and something emerged. Her console lit up with warnings, contact alerts, energy signatures that didn't match anything in the Starfleet database. "Commander, we have a contact emerging from the anomaly. Configuration: it looks like a mobile suit, but the energy signature is off the scale. It's producing more power than a gelgoog by a factor of 3. Commander Parks moved to her station, studying the readings with growing concern. "Hail it. All frequencies." "No response, sir." "Wait, it's moving. Heading directly toward the starbase. Speed. My God, it's fast. Faster than anything we've seen." Through the viewports, they could see it now. A mobile suit, but unlike any the Federation had encountered. Where Zeon mobile suits were bulky and utilitarian, this one was sleek, almost elegant. Its armor was pristine white with red, blue, and yellow accents. Its mono-eye was a striking yellow-green. And in its hands, it carried a beam rifle and shield that radiated power signatures that made Zeon's gelgoog weapons look primitive. "Sir, it's charging weapons. Red alert. Shields up. Prepare to." The white mobile suit fired. Its beam rifle discharged with such power that the shot punched through the starbase's shields, carved through 3 decks, and emerged from the other side. The starbase shuddered, alarms blaring, as systems failed across multiple sections. "Return fire." The starbase's phaser arrays lit up, converging on the white mobile suit. The beam struck its shield, a physical shield made of some kind of ultra-dense alloy, and the shield absorbed the energy without even glowing. The mobile suit raised its beam rifle again. Inside the RX-782 Gundam's cockpit, Ensign Amuro Ray was confused and terrified. One moment he'd been fighting Char near Side 7. The next he'd been pulled through some kind of spatial distortion into. Wherever this was, the stars were wrong. His communications were dead, and this space station had fired on him without warning. "Why are they shooting at me?" Amuro shouted to no one, his hands working the controls with the instinctive skill that had made him a terror to Zeon forces. "I'm on their side. I'm Earth Federation." He fired another warning shot, deliberately missing the station's critical systems. He wanted to disable them, force them to talk, figure out what was going on. But through his targeting computer, he saw Federation markings that didn't match any design he knew. The station's configuration was completely alien, and the weapons it was using directed energy weapons, yes, but far more advanced than anything the Earth Federation Space Force possessed. This isn't right. None of this is right. A new contact appeared on his sensors, a ship, sleek and elegant, dropping out of some kind of faster-than-light travel that wasn't Minovsky Drive. The ship moved with authority, placing itself between the Gundam and the damaged starbase. Aboard the USS Enterprise D, Captain Picard watched the white mobile suit on his view screen with a mixture of awe and concern. "Mr. Data, analysis. The mobile suit is significantly more advanced than any Zeon unit we've encountered, Captain. Its armor appears to be constructed from Luna titanium alloy. Its reactor output is approximately 1,380 kilowatts, nearly double that of a gelgoog. The beam rifle is operating at megaparticle compression ratios that suggest focusing technology beyond current Zeon capabilities. And its performance specifications." Data paused. "Captain, this mobile suit could potentially defeat our entire ship in single combat." "Reassuring, Mr. Data." Picard stood, smoothing his uniform. "Hail it. And this time, use every language variant we have for Earth. If this is another Zeon pilot, I want to make sure our translator can parse their dialect." "Hailing frequencies open, sir. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You have attacked a Federation facility without provocation. Power down your weapons and prepare to be taken into custody, or we will be forced to respond with lethal force." In the Gundam's cockpit, Amuro heard the transmission clearly, but the words made no sense. Federation starship? What's a starship? And that's not standard EFSF protocol. He activated his own comm. This is Ensign Amuro Ray, pilot of the RX-782 Gundam, Earth Federation Space Force. I don't know where I am or how I got here, but you fired on me first. I want to speak to your commanding officer. On the Enterprise bridge, the crew exchanged glances. Earth Federation Space Force, Picard repeated quietly. Like the Zeon pilots. Another case of mistaken identity. Captain, the pilot identifies as Amuro Ray, Data reported, cross-referencing that name against captured Zeon intelligence. Sir, according to Zeon reports, Amuro Ray is the pilot of a prototype mobile suit designated Gundam. Zeon forces refer to him as the White Devil. He has destroyed over 24 Zeon mobile suits in combat. They consider him their most dangerous adversary. So he's not with Zeon, he's fighting against them. Picard made a decision. Mr. Worf, lower shields. Ensign Ray, this is Captain Picard. I believe there has been a terrible misunderstanding. You're not in your universe anymore. You've been transported to another reality. We are not the Earth Federation Space Force. We are the United Federation of Planets. I would very much like to speak with you face to face and explain the situation. Amuro's mind raced. Another universe? That sounded like something from a science fiction novel. But the evidence was undeniable. The stars were wrong. The station's design was alien. And these people were using technology that shouldn't exist. And most importantly, they were offering to talk rather than shoot. Okay, I'm lowering my weapons. But I'm keeping my shields up until I know what's going on. Understood. Transport directly to our bridge in 5 minutes. And Ensign Ray, welcome to the 24th century. When Amuro Ray materialized on the Enterprise bridge, his first reaction was shock. The bridge was nothing like an EFSF warship, no cramped corridors, no military efficiency. This looked more like a luxury cruiser. And the crew? He saw humans, yes, but also a man with a golden face who moved with mechanical precision, and a large man with a ridged forehead who looked like no human Amuro had ever seen. Aliens, Amuro breathed. You're really aliens. Some of us, yes, Picard said calmly, gesturing to a chair. Please, sit. I imagine this is quite overwhelming. Can I offer you something to drink? 30 minutes later, after Picard had explained the situation, the dimensional rift, the Zeon invasion, the war of mistaken identity, Amuro sat in stunned silence. His hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. You're saying Zeon is here, in this universe, fighting a war against you because they think you're the EFSF. Correct. They've killed thousands of our people, occupied 3 of our colonies, used nuclear weapons, and we've responded with equal force because we believed they were hostile invaders. Picard leaned forward. But you're proof that there's another side to this story. You fight Zeon. You're their enemy, which means this war truly is based entirely on a tragic mistake. How many have died? Amuro asked quietly. On our side, nearly 400,000, military and civilian combined. On theirs, we estimate 180,000. Picard's voice was heavy. All of them dying in a war that never should have happened. Amuro closed his eyes. In his universe, the 1-year war had killed billions in the first week when Zeon dropped a colony on Earth. But those deaths had a context, a reason: Zeon's drive for independence, the Earth Federation's oppression of spacenoids. This was just pointless slaughter based on confusion. I need to tell them, Amuro said. I need to tell Zeon they're fighting the wrong enemy. If Char is here, Char Aznable is here, Picard confirmed. We captured him briefly, but he escaped. He's now leading Zeon's mobile suit forces. If you could speak with him, convince him. Char won't listen to me. We're enemies. Amuro shook his head. But there are others. Ramba Ral, if he's here. Or one of the Zabi family. They might listen to reason. Then we need to arrange a meeting. A parley. Before this war escalates beyond anyone's ability to control. Picard stood. Ensign Ray, I know you've just arrived in our universe, but I must ask. Will you help us end this war? Amuro thought of all the people who'd already died, thought of the Gundam's weapons and how many Zakus he'd destroyed, each one containing a pilot who was just a person following orders. Thought of how easily this war could spread, consuming both universes if the dimensional rift remained open. Yes, I'll help, but first I need to fight. Fight? Zeon needs to see the Gundam, needs to know I'm here. Because if I'm here, and I'm not with the EFSF, Amuro's eyes hardened with determination. Then maybe they'll start asking the right questions. The opportunity came sooner than anyone expected. Char Aznabel, leading a squadron of 12 Gelgoogs, was conducting a raid on Starbase 157, a major Federation shipyard where damaged vessels were being repaired. The intelligence was solid. Destroy the shipyard, and the Federation's ability to maintain their fleet would be crippled. What Char didn't expect was the Gundam. The White Devil emerged from behind a damaged starship, its white armor gleaming in the light of the nearby star. Char's sensors screamed warnings, massive energy output, weapons charging, threat level critical. For a moment, he thought it was some new Federation weapon. Then he saw the distinctive design, the RX-782 designation on its shoulder, and his blood ran cold. The White Devil. But that's impossible. Amuro can't be here. He's in our universe, fighting near Side 7. His comm crackled. Hello, Char. Surprised to see me? That voice. Casual, almost friendly, with the confidence of someone who'd killed dozens of Zeon's finest. Char's hands tightened on his controls. Amuro Ray. So the EFSF did bring their prototype to this theater. I should have known they'd deploy their best weapon against us. That's the thing, Char. I'm not with the EFSF. Not the one you're thinking of. Anyway, the Gundam raised its beam rifle, the targeting laser painting Char's Gelgoog. We need to talk. Talk? After you've killed dozens of our pilots. After you've killed hundreds of thousands of people who aren't your enemy. Amuro's voice cracked with emotion. Char, listen to me. This isn't our universe. These people aren't the Earth Federation Space Force. They're not space noids or Earth noids. They're something completely different. You're fighting the wrong war. Char processed this information with the tactical mind that had made him Zeon's most dangerous ace. The strange ships, the alien crew members they'd captured, the technology that didn't match EFSF capabilities, the confusion in every engagement. It all fit. If what you're saying is true and I'm not saying I believe you, then how did we get here? How did you get here? The same way you did. Through a dimensional rift. Some kind of spatial anomaly that connects our universe to this one. The Gundam lowered its rifle slightly, not a surrender, but a gesture of peace. Char, I've been in this universe for less than a day and I can already see the mistake you've made. These people don't even know what the one-year war is. They've never heard of Zeon or the Earth Federation. They're as confused as you are. Then why did they attack us? Because you attacked them first. You came through that rift shooting, Char. You destroyed their ships without even trying to communicate. What were they supposed to think? Behind Char, his wingmen were getting anxious. Commander, we have the White Devil targeted. Should we engage? Char was silent for a long moment, his tactical computer running scenarios. If Amuro was lying, this was an elaborate trap. If he was telling the truth, Zeon had been committing atrocities against innocent people for weeks. Either way, the situation demanded investigation. All units, hold fire. Amuro, I'll hear you out, but not here. Not in the middle of a battlefield. Propose a location for a parley. There's a neutral asteroid at coordinates I'm transmitting. No weapons, no backup. Just you, me, and the truth. Agreed. 1 hour. The parley took place on a barren asteroid. 2 mobile suits standing on opposite sides of a crater. Char had left his Gelgoog in the care of his wingmen and taken a shuttle to the meeting point. Amuro had done the same with the Gundam. Now the 2 pilots, sworn enemies in their own universe, stood face to face in their normal suits, separated by 10 meters and months of bloodshed. You're really here, Char said, his golden helmet reflecting the distant stars. The White Devil himself, and you're really Char Aznable. Or should I say Casval Rem Daikun? Amuro had done his homework. I know who you are, Char. I know why you fight. Your father's vision. Your revenge against the zombies. But this war? This isn't part of that. This is just murder. Strong words from someone who's killed dozens of my comrades. In a war, I understand. A war with a purpose. But this? Amuro gestured at the stars around them. You're fighting people who've been at peace for 200 years. People who've built a civilization based on cooperation between species. And you're tearing it apart because you mistook them for the EFSF. Char was silent. Then, slowly, he removed his helmet. Beneath it was a young man with blonde hair and sharp features, handsome, aristocratic, and carrying the weight of too many secrets. Show me proof. Show me something that proves this isn't the Earth Federation. Amuro pulled up a datapad he'd borrowed from the Enterprise. These are sensor logs from their ships. Their faster-than-light travel doesn't use Minovsky drives, it warps space itself. Their weapons aren't based on any technology from our universe. And their crew. He pulled up images of Worf, Data, various alien species. Tell me, Char, does the Earth Federation employ Klingons, Vulcans, androids? Char studied the images, his tactical mind processing implications. The evidence was damning. These weren't humans with genetic modifications. These were genuinely different species, with their own languages, cultures, histories. The EFSF couldn't fake this, wouldn't fake this. My God, we really have been fighting the wrong enemy. Yes. And now the question is, what are you going to do about it? Before Char could answer, both their communicators erupted with emergency alerts. Amuro's from the Enterprise, Char's from the Zeon fleet. The same message, different sources. Massive energy buildup detected. Weapons charging. Targeting Earth. What's happening? Amuro demanded into his comm. Picard's voice came back tight with stress. We're detecting a massive energy signature near the edge of the system. It appears to be some kind of superweapon. Mr. Data is analyzing now. My God, it's a solar ray system. A massive mirror array designed to focus stellar energy into a directed beam. And it's targeting Earth. Char was receiving similar reports from Ramba Ral. Commander Aznable, this is Lieutenant Ral. We have a situation. Admiral Cassilia Zabi has activated a solar ray system that we didn't know was in this universe. She's refusing all communications. Sir, she's going to fire on the Federation's Earth. She's going to vaporize the entire planet. Char and Amuro locked eyes across the crater. In that moment, old enmities became irrelevant. They were both soldiers, both people who'd seen too much death, and neither of them could allow genocide on this scale. How long until it fires? Char demanded. 4 hours. Maybe less. Then we have 4 hours to stop her. Char looked at Amuro. Temporary alliance? Temporary alliance. Amuro extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Char shook it. 2 enemies, united by a common cause. It was the beginning of the end of the war. Aboard the Zeon command ship Guazin, Commander Dozal Zabi, a massive man with a scarred face and cybernetic eye, listened to Char's report with growing horror. Beside him, Ramba Ral stood at attention, his face grim. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. Dozal rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. My sister Cassilia has activated the solar ray. She intends to fire on the Federation's Earth, and she's doing this even though we now have evidence that these people aren't the EFSF? Correct, sir, Char replied via view screen. I've reviewed the evidence Ensign Ray provided. It's conclusive. We've been fighting the wrong enemy. And now Cassilia wants to commit genocide against innocent people rather than admit the mistake. This is madness. Dozal slammed his fist on the armrest, denting the metal. We're soldiers of Zeon, not butchers. Lieutenant Ral, what's your assessment? Ral stepped forward. Sir, I've had doubts about this campaign since the beginning. The enemy doesn't act like the EFSF. Their colonies don't match EFSF patterns. And their confusion in every engagement seemed genuine. If Commander Aznable's evidence confirms we're in another universe, then we need to stand down immediately and seek peace. Agreed. But Cassilia won't listen to reason. She never has. Dozal's cybernetic eye glowed red with anger. She sees this as an opportunity for conquest, and she'll sacrifice our honor to achieve it. Lieutenant Rahl, Char, I am authorizing you to stop her by any means necessary, even if that means fighting other Zeon forces. Sir, that's an order. I won't allow my family's name to be associated with genocide based on a mistake. If Cassilia wants to fire that weapon, she'll have to go through me first. The solar ray was a terror weapon from the 1-year war, an array of massive mirrors that could focus stellar radiation into a beam capable of vaporizing fleets or planetary surfaces. It had been used once in Zeon's timeline, destroying the Federation's Reval fleet. Now, Cassilia Zabi had secretly transported a solar ray system through the dimensional rift, assembled it in Federation space, and aimed it at Earth. Her flagship, the Chimera, hung near the solar ray's control station. Around it, Loyal Force's 30 mobile suits and 4 warships formed a protective screen. They'd been told this was a final strike against the EFSF, the blow that would win the war. They had no idea they were about to participate in genocide. Cassilia Zabi stood on her bridge, a severe woman with cold eyes and colder calculations. She'd reviewed the same evidence as Dozal and Char. She knew this wasn't the EFSF. She simply didn't care. These people have resources we need, she said to her tactical officer. Technology beyond what we possess. Territory we can claim. It doesn't matter if they're the EFSF or not, they're weak, and the strong have a right to rule the weak. We'll destroy their Earth, shatter their government, and claim this universe for Zeon, for the Zabi family, for me. Ma'am, we're receiving transmissions from Commander Dozal. He's ordering us to stand down. Ignore him. My dear brother has gone soft. Always had a sentimental streak. Cassilia checked the firing countdown. 3 hours until the solar ray is fully charged. Begin defensive preparations. If Dozal wants to stop us, he'll have to fight through our forces first. The battle lines formed with tragic inevitability. On one side, Cassilia's loyalists, 30 mobile suits and 4 ships, committed to firing the solar ray. On the other, Dozal's forces, Char's squadron, Ramba Ral's units, 40 mobile suits total, plus the entire Federation fleet that could reach the area in time. And flying between them, a white mobile suit that both sides feared and respected. Captain Picard stood on the Enterprise bridge, watching the tactical display with grim determination. Status report. The Zeon forces are divided, data reported. Approximately 40% are supporting Admiral Cassilia's attempt to fire the weapon. The remaining 60%, led by Commander Dozal Zabi, are opposing her. Additionally, the pilot Amuro Ray in the Gundam has positioned himself to assault the solar ray control station directly. And our fleet? 23 ships in position and ready to engage. More are arriving every minute. But Captain, if the solar ray fires before we can destroy it, Earth will be devastated. Casualty estimates exceed 8 billion people. 8 billion. The entire population of Earth. Picard felt the weight of that number crushing down on him. Everything, the entire war, all the death and destruction came down to the next few hours. Open a channel to all Zeon forces. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. I'm speaking to those of you who oppose Admiral Cassilia's actions. You've been at war with us for weeks, but you've also discovered that war was based on a mistake. We are not your enemy. We never were. Now you have a choice. Continue fighting and be complicit in genocide, or stand with us and stop a crime that will haunt both our peoples for generations. The choice is yours. On his command ship, Dozal listened to Picard's words and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. All units loyal to Zeon's true purpose to spacenoid freedom and honor will stand with the Federation against my sister's madness. Sieg Zeon means victory through honor, not victory through atrocity. The battle for the solar ray began with Char Aznabel's Red Gelgoog leading the charge. Behind him, Zeon mobile suits, once enemies, now allies, flew in formation with Federation starships toward the defensive screen around the weapon. Cassilia's forces opened fire. Beam rifles and ship-mounted weapons filled space with deadly light. The mixed Federation Zeon force took casualties immediately, 2 mobile suits vaporized, a Federation ship crippled. But they kept coming. All units, target their defensive positions, Dozal commanded. Clear a path for the Gundam. Amuro pushed the RX-782 to its limits, dodging through the crossfire with reflexes that seemed almost superhuman. His beam rifle spoke with lethal precision, 1 shot, 1 kill. A Zaku exploded. A goof tumbled away, trailing debris. The Gundam was living up to its reputation as the White Devil. "I'm through their screen," Amuro reported. "Moving to engage the control station." "Negative." Cassilia's voice cut across all channels. "Solar ray firing in 30 seconds. Even if you destroy the control station, the automated systems will complete the firing sequence. You're too late, White Devil." Amuro saw the massive mirror array beginning to glow, stellar radiation being focused into a killing beam. 30 seconds. He had 30 seconds to do the impossible. "Char, I need you to distract their defenses. Already on it." Char's Gelgoog danced through enemy fire, his beam rifle blazing. "Go. Stop her." The Gundam boosted toward the solar ray's control core, located at the center of the mirror array. The station's defensive turrets opened fire, but Amuro dodged with skill born of dozens of combat missions. His targeting computer locked onto the reactor core, a massive fusion plant that powered the entire array. "This is for everyone who died in this pointless war." Amuro fired his beam rifle at maximum power. The shot punched through the station's armor, found the reactor, and triggered a cascade failure. The explosion was visible from Earth, a brief new star that marked the death of the solar ray and everyone aboard the control station. The mirror array shattered, massive segments tumbling through space. The threat was ended, but Cassilia Zabi, aboard her flagship, was not finished. "If I can't have this universe, neither will you. All ships, ram the Federation vessels. Sieg Zeon, belay that order." Dozal's voice thundered across all channels. "All Zeon forces, stand down. Cassilia, you're relieved of command. You don't have the authority." A beam struck Cassilia's flagship, not from a Federation ship but from Dozal's command vessel. The shot was precise, surgical, targeting the bridge. Admiral Cassilia Zabi had one moment to realize her brother had turned against her, and then she ceased to exist. The battle ended. The solar ray was destroyed. Cassilia was dead. And for the first time since the war began, both sides stopped shooting. In the silence that followed, Char and Amuro found themselves floating in space, their mobile suits drifting near each other. Char's Gelgoog was damaged, one arm missing. Amuro's Gundam bore scorch marks across its white armor. "It's over," Amuro said quietly. "The war's over." "One war, perhaps," Char replied. "But we both know the real one-year war is still being fought in our universe. When we return, we'll be enemies again. Maybe. Or maybe we remember this. Remember that we fought together once. Remember that there are things more important than old grudges." Char was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. "You're an idealist, Amuro Ray. In another life, we might have been friends. In another life, we might have been." They parted ways, each returning to their forces. The war of mistaken identity was entering its final phase. Now came the hard part. Peace. The conference room aboard Deep Space Nine was neutral territory, chosen specifically because it wasn't a Starfleet vessel or a Zeon ship. Commander Benjamin Sisko stood at the head of the table, flanked by Captain Picard and Admiral Ross. Across from them sat Commander Dozal Zabi, his massive frame barely fitting in the standard-issue chair, his cybernetic eye glowing softly in the station's lighting. Beside him were Char Aznable, his golden helmet removed to reveal his true face, and Lieutenant Ramba Ral, wearing dress uniform and looking deeply uncomfortable. Between them, on a hollow projector, floated the casualty figures that had brought them to this moment. "Federation losses," Admiral Ross began, his voice carrying the weight of every name on that list. 38 starships destroyed. 2 colonies significantly damaged, Andoria and New Providence. 412,000. 643 dead. Military and civilian combined. Dozal's jaw tightened. Zeon losses. 26 ships destroyed or rendered non-operational. 15% of our mobile suit forces, approximately 75 units lost. 182,912 dead. He paused. And one member of the Zabi family, executed by her own brother for attempting genocide. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of those numbers. Nearly 600,000 people dead in a war that never should have happened. 600,000 lives lost because two groups of humans from different universes had failed to communicate. We can't bring them back, Picard said quietly. All we can do is ensure they didn't die in vain, that we learn from this tragedy and never repeat it. Agreed, Dozel rumbled. I propose an immediate ceasefire, effective immediately. All Zeon forces will withdraw from Federation space. All Federation forces will cease hostile actions against Zeon personnel. Prisoners will be exchanged, and we will work together to find a way for my people to return to our own universe. That dimensional rift you came through, Sisko said. Our scientists believe it's still there, but it's destabilizing. We don't know how long it will remain open. Char leaned forward. Then we need to move quickly. We have approximately 2,000 Zeon personnel in this universe. Ship crews, mobile suit pilots, support staff. Getting them all back through the rift before it closes is going to be a logistical challenge. We'll help, Ross said. It wasn't a question or an offer, it was a statement of fact. Whatever resources you need to evacuate safely, you'll have them. We just want this war to end. As do we. Rambaral spoke for the first time, his voice quiet but firm. Commander Dozel, with your permission, I'd like to personally oversee the evacuation of our forces from the occupied colonies. There are amends that need to be made. Dozel nodded slowly. Granted. And Ral, when you apologize to those people, you speak for all of Zeon. Make them understand that we're not monsters. We're just soldiers who made a terrible mistake. The ceasefire was signed 3 hours later. The war that had raged for 6 weeks ended not with a bang, but with the scratch of pens on datapads and the exchange of encrypted communication codes. Both sides pulled back from contested positions. The shooting stopped. The dying stopped. But the healing would take much longer. On New Providence, the colony that had been occupied and then bombarded, the scars of war were everywhere. Lieutenant Rambaral walked through the ruins of the capital city, his normal suit helmet under his arm, breathing the same air as the people his forces had terrorized. Around him, Starfleet personnel supervised the withdrawal of Zeon forces, but he'd asked to make this journey alone. He found what he was looking for in what had once been a residential district. A memorial wall, hastily erected, covered with names and photographs of the dead. Thousands of them. Civilians killed in the occupation, in the bombardment, in the desperate fighting that had consumed their peaceful world. An elderly Bolian woman stood before the wall, her blue hand touching a photograph of a younger man. She didn't look at Raul when he approached, but she spoke anyway. My son, Korath. He was an engineer. Never hurt anyone in his life. Her voice was hollow, emptied of everything but grief. He died trying to defend our city against your machines. I know, Raul said quietly. I was there. My forces. I was in command of the occupation. His death is my responsibility. Now she looked at him, her eyes red from crying but blazing with anger. You're the one. The blue mobile suit. You gave the orders. Yes. Raul didn't flinch from her gaze. I followed orders I should have questioned. I told myself these people were the enemy because my superiors said so. I knew it felt wrong, but I was a soldier, and soldiers follow orders. He looked at the wall, at the thousands of names. I can't bring them back. I can't undo what was done. But I can tell you that every one of these deaths will haunt me for the rest of my life. And I can promise you that I will spend that life making sure this never happens again. Your promises mean nothing to the dead. No, they don't. But perhaps they mean something to the living. Raul pulled out a data chip. These are the names of every Zeon soldier who died in this war. 182,000 of them. Most of them were young. Most of them believed they were fighting for freedom. And they all died in a mistake. He held out the chip. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I ask that you remember, we're all victims of this war. Zeon. and Federation alike. The woman looked at the chip for a long moment, then took it. She didn't say anything else, just turned back to her son's photograph. Raul stood with her in silence for a few minutes, then left. There were thousands more apologies to make, and he had a lifetime to make them. At Starfleet Command on Earth, engineers and scientists from both sides worked together on the problem of the dimensional rift. Dr. Leah Brahms, the same engineer who developed the anti-shield harmonics for fighting Zeon, now found herself collaborating with Zeon scientists to save their lives. "The rift is definitely collapsing," she explained to the assembled team, which included Zeon technical specialists and Starfleet's best minds. "Our initial analysis suggests it's being pulled closed by the natural tendency of space-time to repair itself. We estimate you have 72 hours, maybe 96 at the outside, before the rift becomes too unstable for safe transit." A Zeon scientist, a young woman named Dr. Kato, studied the readings with concern. "Can we stabilize it? Use graviton emitters or subspace field generators to hold it open longer?" "We've considered that," Brahm said. "The problem is, we don't fully understand the mechanics of how the rift was created in the first place. Any attempt to manipulate it might accelerate the collapse, instead of preventing it. Then we need to evacuate everyone within the 72-hour window," Commander LaForge said, studying the logistics. 2,000 Zeon personnel, plus equipment and supplies they'll need to survive once they're back in their own universe. That's going to require multiple trips through the rift. And each trip destabilizes it further, Data added. Every transit creates gravitational stress on the dimensional membrane. I calculate we can safely make approximately 12 round trips before the probability of catastrophic collapse exceeds 50%. 12 trips for 2,000 people, Shar said, doing the math in his head. That's over 160 people per trip. Most of our ships can't carry that many. "Then we'll provide transport," Admiral Ross said. "Starfleet vessels will ferry your people to the rift. It's the least we can do." The evacuation began immediately. Zeon personnel assembled at designated collection points across Federation space. Some came willingly, eager to return home and put this nightmare behind them. Others came reluctantly, having formed connections in this universe that they were loath to break. On Deep Space Nine, a young Zeon pilot named Ensign Steiner sat in the replimat with a Bajoran woman named Lita. They'd met during his brief captivity on the station, before the ceasefire. She'd been assigned to deliver his meals, and they'd talked. Just talked. About life, about dreams, about everything except the war. "You have to go," Lita said, though her eyes were wet. "Your people need you. The 1-year war is still being fought in your universe. I know, but I've seen what peace looks like here. Your Federation, the real Federation, it's everything Zeon claims to fight for. Freedom, cooperation, prosperity. And I'm going back to a war that might last years." Steiner took her hand. "Come with me." "I can't. This is my home. And you," she smiled sadly. "You have a war to fight, maybe even to end, if you remember what you learned here." They said their goodbyes in the transporter room, along with dozens of other couples who'd found each other in the brief peace between battles. When Steiner materialized on the Zeon transport ship, he carried with him a small holographic projector containing Lita's image, a reminder of what peace could look like. Not everyone chose to leave. In the brig of Starbase 375, a dozen Zeon soldiers sat in detention, facing war crimes charges. They'd participated in the massacre of civilians on New Providence, or the nuclear attack on Rigel V, or other atrocities that couldn't be forgiven or forgotten. The Federation had offered them a choice: return to their universe and face Zeon military justice, or stay and face Federation justice. Most chose to stay. Zeon military justice for war crimes was notoriously harsh, and they'd heard rumors that Commander Dozel was purging anyone associated with Cassilia's hardline faction. At least in the Federation, they'd get a trial. "You understand," the JAG officer explained to them, "that you'll likely spend the rest of your lives in a Federation penal colony. Is that really preferable to taking your chances in your own universe?" One of the prisoners, a former mobile suit pilot named Arkov, laughed bitterly. "In our universe, I'm a war criminal who attacked civilians. Here, I'm just a confused soldier who made bad decisions in a war he didn't understand. Yeah, I'll take my chances with your justice system. There were others who chose to stay for different reasons. A Zeon engineer who'd fallen in love with a human scientist, a mobile suit mechanic who'd been offered a position at Starfleet's Advanced Propulsion Lab, a former officer who'd become disillusioned with Zeon's ideology and wanted to see what a real Federation looked like. The Federation allowed them to stay, with conditions. They'd be monitored for the first year. They'd have to report regularly to local authorities. But they'd be given a chance to build new lives in a universe that wasn't at war. On the Enterprise D, Amuro Ray stood in the observation lounge, staring at the stars and wrestling with the most difficult decision of his life. Behind him, Captain Picard approached quietly. Contemplating your choice, Ensign Ray? Yeah. Amuro didn't turn around. In my universe, the 1-year war is still raging. The White Base crew needs me. Bright, Mirai, Sayla, they're counting on the Gundam to make a difference. If I stay here, I'm abandoning them. But if you return, you go back to a war that's killed billions and shows no sign of ending. Picard stood beside him, looking out at the same stars. You've seen what peace looks like, Amuro. You've seen a civilization that's been at peace for 2 centuries. Is that not worth fighting for? It is, but it's not my fight. My fight is against Zeon, the real Zeon, the ones who dropped a colony on Earth and killed half the human race. The Zeon here, they're just people who made a mistake. But the ones back home, they're genuine monsters, and someone needs to stop them. Even if it costs you your life, especially then. Amuro finally turned to face Picard. You told me about your brother, Robert. How he died in a fire because he stayed to fight it instead of running. You said you didn't understand his choice at first, but eventually you realized he did it because someone had to. That's what this is. Someone has to pilot the Gundam. Someone has to fight Zeon, and that someone is me. Picard was quiet for a long moment. You're very young to carry such a burden. I'm 18. In my universe, that's old enough to fight and die. Hell, most of the mobile suit pilots on both sides are younger than me. War doesn't care about age. Amuro managed a tired smile. But I wanted to thank you, Captain. You and your crew showed me something I didn't think existed any more: hope. The possibility that the war might actually end someday. That humans might actually figure out how to live in peace. I'm going to remember that. And maybe, when the 1-year war is finally over, I'll try to build something like your Federation. Then I wish you luck, Ensign. And I hope we meet again, in a better universe than either of ours has been. The next day, Char Aznable came to the Enterprise to speak with Amuro. The 2 pilots who'd been enemies, then reluctant allies, now faced each other one last time. You're really going back, Char said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, you? Of course. My war with the Zombies isn't finished. Duzzle is a decent man, but his father and his remaining siblings are monsters. I have a duty to fulfill. Char paused. Though I have to admit, these past few days have given me perspective. Maybe revenge isn't the only path forward. Don't go soft on me, Char. I need you to be the Red Comet when I get back. Someone has to keep Zeon honest. And you need to be the White Devil. Someone has to protect the innocents caught in the crossfire. Char extended his hand. Until we meet again, Amuro Ray. And when we do, I expect you to have improved your skills. I won't go easy on you next time. Amuro shook his hand, feeling the strange camaraderie that existed between 2 enemies who'd fought together once. Same to you, Char. And who knows, maybe in another 10 years we'll actually be on the same side. Perhaps. Though that would rob the universe of one of its greatest rivalries. They parted with mutual respect, each returning to their own forces. The dimensional rift was opening for the final evacuations, and they needed to be ready. The last convoy assembled at the edge of Federation space, near the coordinates where the dimensional rift pulsed and flickered like a dying star. 12 Zeon ships, escorted by 6 Federation starships, prepared to make the final crossing. Aboard those ships were the last of the Zeon personnel, including Dozal Zabi, Char Aznable, Rambaral, and Amuro Ray in his Gundam. On the bridge of his command ship, Dozal looked at the rift that would take him home and felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the nightmare was ending, sadness for all that had been lost. "Commander Dozel," Admiral Ross's voice came over the comm. "You're cleared for transit. We've stabilized the rift as much as possible, but our sensors indicate it will collapse completely within 30 minutes of the last ship passing through. Make sure all your people are accounted for." "Understood, Admiral. And thank you for your mercy, for your help, for treating us like human beings instead of monsters, even after everything we did. You're welcome." "And Dozel? When you get back to your universe, tell your people about us. Tell them there's another Federation out there that actually lives up to the ideals both our civilizations claim. Maybe it will inspire them to be better." "I will." Ross out. The Zeon convoy began moving toward the rift. One by one, the ships entered the swirling vortex and disappeared, returning to their own universe and their own war. On the Enterprise, Picard watched them go with mixed feelings. "Captain," Data reported, "the final ship has entered the rift. All Zeon personnel have successfully evacuated Federation space." "And the rift?" "Collapsing rapidly. I estimate complete closure in 28 seconds." Picard watched as the dimensional tear sealed itself, space-time healing over the wound like skin closing over a cut. Within 30 seconds, there was no sign the rift had ever existed. The Zeon forces were gone, returned to their own reality. The war was over, but the aftermath had just begun. 6 months after the ceasefire, the Federation was still counting the cost. The two colonies that had been most heavily damaged, Andoria and New Providence, were undergoing massive reconstruction efforts. Billions of credits were being poured into rebuilding infrastructure, relocating refugees, providing medical care for the wounded. On Andoria, at the site where a Zeon mobile suit had crashed during the initial attacks, a memorial was being constructed. It would honor all the dead, from both sides. Federation and Zeon names would be inscribed together, a reminder that everyone who died in this war was a victim of mistaken identity. The dedication ceremony was attended by survivors from both civilizations. The Federation Council had invited the dozen Zeon personnel who'd chosen to stay, and they stood now before the memorial wall, former enemies mourning together. President Jerish Inyo of the United Federation of Planets gave the dedication speech. "We gather here today to remember 400,000 Federation citizens and 180,000 Zeon soldiers who died in a war that never should have happened. They died because of confusion, because of assumption, because two groups of humans from different universes failed to communicate before resorting to violence." He paused, letting the words sink in. In the crowd, former Zeon Ensign Steiner stood with tears running down his face, thinking of his comrades who'd never see peace. Beside him, Lita held his hand, offering what comfort she could. "This memorial stands as a warning," the president continued. "A warning that violence is easy and communication is hard, that assumptions can kill as surely as any weapon, that we must always try to talk before we resort to force. Because the alternative is this: hundreds of thousands dead, billions traumatized, two civilizations scarred by a conflict that served no purpose. But it also stands as a testament to hope, because when the truth emerged, when both sides finally understood the mistake they'd made, they chose peace. Zeon Commander Dozel Zabi chose to kill his own sister rather than allow genocide. Char Aznavour and Amuro Ray, sworn enemies, fought together to prevent planetary destruction. And hundreds of individuals on both sides chose mercy over revenge, healing over hatred. We cannot bring back the dead, but we can honor their memory by learning from this tragedy, by building a future where communication comes before conflict, where we assume the best in others before assuming the worst, where we remember that even enemies are people, and people can change." The memorial wall was unveiled. Thousands of names, glowing softly in the Andorian twilight. Federation and Zeon, side by side, equals in death even if they'd been enemies in life. In the Federation Council chambers on Earth, the political fallout from the war was still ongoing. Questions were being asked. How had Starfleet allowed an unknown hostile force to penetrate so deeply into Federation space? Why had the initial response been so militaristic? Could more have been done to establish communication before resorting to violence? Admiral Ross testified before the council for 3 days, explaining the decisions made during the crisis. He didn't make excuses. He'd ordered the orbital bombardment of New Providence. He'd authorized the use of transporter-deployed weapons. He'd presided over a war that had killed nearly 500,000 people. "I made the best decisions I could with the information I had," Ross said on the final day of testimony. "But those decisions led to massive civilian casualties. If I could go back and change things, I would. But I can't. All I can do is learn from my mistakes and hope that the next crisis is handled better." The council debated for weeks before reaching a verdict. Admiral Ross was censured but not removed from command. The Federation's first contact protocols were completely rewritten to emphasize communication over force. Starfleet's rules of engagement were modified to require exhaustive attempts at diplomacy before military action. And quietly, in classified sessions, the Federation began preparing for the possibility of future cross-dimensional incursions. If Zeon could come through a rift, others might as well. The Federation needed to be ready, but this time, they'd be ready to talk, not just to fight. On Deep Space Nine, the Zeon prisoners who'd been awaiting trial were sentenced. Most received terms ranging from 15 to 40 years in Federation penal colonies, with the possibility of parole for good behavior. The sentences were harsh but not cruel. The Federation believed in rehabilitation, not revenge. One prisoner, former Lieutenant Wald, who'd participated in civilian massacres on New Providence, received a life sentence without parole. He'd shown no remorse, no understanding that what he'd done was wrong. The judge had been sympathetic to the mistaken identity defense, but not to the extent of excusing deliberate atrocities. "You believed these people were the enemy," the judge said during sentencing. "That might explain your actions, but it doesn't excuse them. You killed civilians deliberately. You showed no mercy to the helpless. And even now, you show no regret. This court finds that you are a danger to society and sentences you to life imprisonment." Wald spat at the judge. "Sieg Zeon. You'll all burn when we return." He was led away to spend the rest of his life in a maximum security facility on a remote asteroid. A cautionary tale about what happens when ideology becomes more important than humanity. But not all the former Zeon personnel followed Wald's path. The engineer who'd fallen in love with a Federation scientist married her in a quiet ceremony on Earth. The mobile suit mechanic who joined Starfleet's propulsion lab published a groundbreaking paper on Minovsky particle physics that revolutionized Federation sensor technology. The former officer who'd become disillusioned with Zeon wrote a book about his experiences that became required reading at Starfleet Academy. They were reminders that people were more than their governments, more than their ideologies, that given a chance, even former enemies could become friends. On the Enterprise D, Captain Picard stood in his ready room, looking at the small piece of Zaku armor mounted on his wall. He'd recovered it from the wreckage after the final battle, a piece of green metal scarred by phaser fire. It had become his memento of the war, a reminder of how easily conflict could arise from misunderstanding. "Captain," Riker's voice came over the comm. "We're receiving a transmission. It's marked as coming from the Universal Century timeline. Zeon frequencies." Picard's eyes widened. "Patch it through to my ready room. Maximum encryption." The view screen flickered to life, showing Commander Dozal Zabi. He looked older, more tired, but alive. Behind him, Picard could see the bridge of a Zeon warship. "Captain Picard, I wasn't sure this transmission would reach you across dimensional barriers, but our scientists managed to create a narrowband subspace link. Commander Dozal, it's good to see you made it home safely. How goes your war? Still raging, still killing, still pointless?" Dozal sighed. "But I wanted you to know. I've been telling everyone who'll listen about your Federation, about what peace actually looks like. Some think I'm mad. Others are starting to question why we're fighting. It's not much, but it's a start. Every journey begins with a single step. Indeed. I also wanted you to know that Amuro Ray is alive and well, still piloting the Gundam, still fighting Zeon forces. But he carries a holographic image of your Enterprise on his console. Says it reminds him that peace is possible. And Char? Still the red comet. Still my enemy. But he's been different since returning. More thoughtful. Less willing to accept easy answers. Your universe changed him, Picard. Changed all of us. I hope it changed us as well. We learned hard lessons from our encounter with your people. Good. Because I have a warning. Duzzle's expression became serious. The dimensional rift may be closed from your side, but we're detecting instabilities on ours. There are other rifts, Captain. Other connections between our universes. They're rare. They're temporary. But they exist. You may encounter more travelers from the Universal Century in the future. Then we'll be ready. But this time, we'll try talking before shooting. I hope so. Because next time, you might not get someone reasonable like me. You might get Girin Zabi, and he makes Cassilia look merciful by comparison. Dozel managed a tired smile. Stay safe, Captain. And thank you for showing us what we could be if we ever stop fighting long enough to try. The transmission ended. Picard sat alone in his ready room, contemplating the future. The war with Zeon was over, but its echoes would resonate for generations. The Federation had been changed by the experience, forced to confront uncomfortable truths about itself. But it had also been given a gift, the knowledge that peace was possible, even between enemies. That communication could prevent conflict, that the assumption of hostility was more dangerous than any weapon. Picard touched the piece of Zaku armor on his wall, feeling the rough texture of the battle-scarred metal. 400,000 Federation citizens had died to teach that lesson. 180,000 Zeon soldiers had died learning it. He would make sure their deaths meant something. In the Universal Century timeline, on the bridge of the White Base, Ensign Amuro Ray sat in the Gundam's cockpit, preparing for another sortie against Zeon forces. On his console, next to his targeting systems and sensor displays, sat a small holographic projector showing the USS Enterprise D. Bright Noah's voice came over the comm. Amuro, we've got Zaku's inbound. 3 units, standard configuration. You ready? Ready, Bright. Amuro's hands moved over the controls with practiced ease. But before launching, he touched the holographic projector, activating it briefly. The Enterprise appeared, ghostly and translucent, a reminder of another universe where humans had learned to build instead of destroy. Someday, Amuro whispered to himself. Someday we'll have that too. Then the Gundam launched, white armor gleaming in the light of a distant star, heading out to fight another battle in a war that had already killed billions. But carried within its pilot's heart was a seed of hope, the knowledge that peace was possible, if only people were brave enough to choose it. The war of mistaken identity was over. Its lessons would echo across 2 universes for generations. And perhaps, somewhere in the future, those lessons would bloom into the peace both civilizations desperately needed. The rift was closed. The dead were mourned. The survivors carried on. And in 2 universes, separated by dimensional barriers that might someday fall again, 2 federations, one at peace, one at war, remembered each other and wondered what might have been.